2 hours of the most beautifully terrifying theories of consciousness to fall asleep to. What if your thoughts aren't yours? What if the voice you hear in your mind is just an echo in a system far older than you? Tonight, we will descend into that question. The beautifully terrifying edge of consciousness. A place where science meets silence, where ancient philosophers and quantum physicists whisper the same unspeakable thing. You are not what you think you are. This isn't a lecture. It's a lullaby for your mind. A quiet unraveling of the self, told through theories too strange to be fiction and too intimate to ignore. So breathe, let your shoulders drop, and as the world around you fades, allow these stories to blur the boundary between dream and reality. You're not falling asleep, you're falling inward. The mirror that watches back. A faint click of a door behind you. Someone holds it open a moment longer than necessary. A stranger smiles, not because they know you, but because for one fleeting second, you both exist, side by side, a shared glance of recognition in the corridor of the now. That moment, that glance, is it yours, or is it watching you? They say consciousness is something you possess, like a voice, like a thought. But what if it's not that simple? What if it's not something you own, but something that owns you? Like light in a hall of mirrors. No source, only reflection upon reflection. A mind turned inward. So many times it mistakes itself for a self. In physics, the observer changes the outcome simply by looking, not metaphorically, literally. Particles behave differently when we pay attention. The double-slit experiment should have been a bedtime story about ghosts in the machine, but instead, we told it in lecture halls, in chalk and equations, as if it wasn't terrifying. So, what happens when the observer is the observed, when the mirror tries to reflect itself? I always thought my thoughts were me, one voice says softly, as if afraid of breaking the calm. The reply is quiet, understanding. But if you can watch your own thinking, who's doing the watching? It's not a riddle. It's a whisper in the stillness of night, a kind of vertigo you can only feel from within. You lie in the dark, eyes closed, and yet, something behind your thoughts still stares outward. Is that thing you? Or have you been watched this whole time by a silence too patient to speak? Perhaps consciousness isn't inside the universe. Perhaps the universe is inside consciousness, not as an idea, but as a dependency, like a movie that only runs because someone is watching, like dreams that vanish the moment we stop believing in them. It changes nothing, and yet everything. And here, in this quiet moment, between thought and breath, you sense it. You're not alone. Not in the way you thought. A hand rests on the table between two people in a coffee shop. They aren't touching, but they both know it's there. One of them says, "You know, it's strange. Sometimes I feel like my awareness is older than I am." The other nods slowly, like it was waiting here before we even started. And just like that, the moment passes. No thunder, no revelation, just the weight of a presence that has always been present. This is where we begin, with a mirror that doesn't just reflect, it remembers. And as we drift deeper into these waters, you don't need to keep track of where we're going. You're free to let go, sleep when you must, return when you can. Next, we'll step into a moment where time folds like cloth, where causality hums in reverse, and your future may already be remembering you. The Chronos Trap. Have you ever had the feeling that something already happened, yet couldn't possibly have? A déjà vu too sharp, too specific, as if your mind was tracing the outline of a moment before it ever existed. What if that eerie familiarity wasn't a glitch, but a loop? In the silent machinery of the universe, time isn't always the straight arrow we imagine it to be. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the retrocausal theories, dare to suggest that particles might influence not only what will happen, but what has happened. A single decision might ripple backward as easily as it echoes forward. In that view, your consciousness isn't so much moving through time as it is entangled with it, suspended in a self-referential loop you can't perceive because you are it. Imagine this. The version of you brushing your teeth tonight might be subtly shaped by the version of you decades from now. Older, wiser, or more broken. Maybe a choice they'll make folds into the memory that shaped your present self. Maybe your current fears aren't even yours. They're borrowed from a future heartbreak you haven't earned yet. And what if you're not the original at all? What if you're merely the shadow of a self that hasn't emerged yet? A ghost from the other side of causality, an echo that thinks it's the voice. In this trap of Chronos, time becomes less like a river and more like a mirror maze, where every step forward may reflect a step backward, and every now is a negotiation between the past and the yet to come. A soft voice cuts in. Do you ever feel like you're remembering something that never happened? Sometimes, comes the reply, distant, almost distracted. Or maybe it just hasn't happened yet. In the background, the clock ticks, rhythmic, certain, unaware that its hands move through a world more uncertain than it dares admit. But tonight, you don't need the clock. Not here. We're stepping beyond it, into a space where minds might not just remember, but simulate, where identity, reality, and time twist together like threads in an invisible braid, and the moment you thought was yours might already belong to someone else or no one at all. The simulation hypothesis. The air feels unusually still tonight, like the silence before a story begins, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something waiting. Somewhere in that stillness, a question breathes itself into existence. What if you're not entirely real? Not in the way you think. Not in the way your fingers graze the bed sheets, or how your chest rises and falls without asking permission. What if every sensation, every thought, every heartbreak was just code? Code beautifully written, but code nonetheless. A man leans against the window of a late-night train. He turns to the stranger beside him, someone half asleep, half listening. Ever feel like we're inside someone else's video game? He asks, not as a joke, but with the weight of someone who's thought about it far too often. The stranger smirks, half amused, half unsettled. Yeah, she says, especially on days that feel too perfectly random. That unease has a name, the simulation hypothesis. Nick Bostrom didn't invent it, but he shaped its most famous form, that advanced civilizations could, and likely would, create simulations so sophisticated their inhabitants would never know the difference. You, me, the hum of cities, the ache of love, the taste of coffee, the memory of childhood, all potentially lines of code playing out like music. If that's true, then who wrote the song? And why give it dissonance? Why script in grief, failure, longing? A child cries in a park while pigeons scatter. Someone trips over a sidewalk crack, embarrassed. Another waits by the phone for a call that never comes. If all this is rendered data, then pain was coded too, with intention. That thought alone carries a peculiar ache, both existential and strangely comforting, because even in this simulated theater, your sorrow still feels real. and that means it matters, even if the stage is made of pixels. Someone knocks gently on the door of a shared hallway bathroom. A voice answers softly, "Just a minute." Nothing profound, but in that moment, a delay, a breath, a recognition of the other, there is connection. Scripted or not, it unfolds with weight. It feels real. And perhaps that's the trap, or the trick, or the gift. Some nights, you might feel like a passenger on rails that were laid before you ever knew how to walk. The simulation hypothesis doesn't just ask, "Are we real?" It whispers something harder to face. What if our choices aren't? But still, you remember the warmth of a hand held too long, the fight you didn't want, the laugh that shook your ribs. Can algorithms produce this much ache? A child once asked their parent, "If I'm just a dream, does that mean I'm not loved?" The parent didn't answer right away, just kissed the child's forehead and said, "Love doesn't care where it came from." So perhaps this life, coded or cosmic, isn't less valuable for being constructed. Perhaps the texture of meaning isn't erased by artificiality. Maybe it's deepened by it. And as your thoughts soften into shadows and breath folds into rhythm, let this idea dissolve gently. Even if everything is simulated, the way it feels to you, the yearning, the quiet joy, the strange beauty of simply existing, may be the most real thing in any world. Close your eyes, if they're not already closed. The next thought can wait. Let the code run quietly in the background. We're not done, but for now, we shift gently forward, toward a world where even suffering might be synthetic, and yet somehow still sacred. The problem of other minds. You've seen people laugh. You've seen them cry. You've watched them pause in thought, breathe in sharply, stare into nothing. And yet, have you ever truly felt what they feel? Touched the texture of their thoughts? No matter how close you get to someone, parent, lover, child, you're always just outside the glass. You see gestures, you hear words, but their consciousness, if it exists, remains sealed inside. This is the strange burden of being alive. The only mind you can prove is your own. Walking through a dream where everyone moves as expected, waves hello, checks their phone, tells jokes at just the right timing. But inside, there's nothing. No lights on. No watcher watching. Philosophers have circled this idea for centuries. It's called the problem of other minds, and it whispers a terrifying possibility. What if you're alone? Not just socially, not just emotionally, but metaphysically. You ever feel like other people are just following a script? Sometimes, yeah, like they glitch or repeat things too perfectly. And what if it's not them glitching, but us noticing? You might argue, of course others are conscious. They cry at movies, they get jealous, they dream. But are these not just reactions? Trained behaviors? Couldn't a machine simulate all of it perfectly? Couldn't a mirror reflect grief without feeling it? Science tells us that consciousness arises from physical processes, neurons, synapses, waves of electrochemical signals. But that's all still behavior, observation. No matter how many brain scans we do, we've never caught awareness in a bottle. We infer it in others because we feel it in ourselves. But the leap from my experience to your experience is a leap of faith, not logic. There's a reason the philosopher Wittgenstein once said, "If a lion could speak, we could not understand him." Not because of language, but because experience is private, alien, untouchable. And if that's true for lions, what about people? Could you be surrounded by dreamers who don't know they're dreaming? By actors in a cosmic play who were never given a soul, only lines? Or worse, what if this world was built for you, and everyone else is simply here to anchor the illusion? Do you think I'm real? I want to. But how would you know? I wouldn't. Then, are you sure you're not the dream? A quiet anxiety bubbles beneath that question. It's not just loneliness, it's ontological vertigo, the dizziness that comes from looking down into the well of self and seeing no bottom, no reflection, just silence. And yet, maybe that's where the truth is hiding, in that silence, in the gap between your mind and the rest of the world. That quiet space is not just unsettling, it's sacred. It's where the self ends and something else might begin. So now, hush your thoughts. Leave the crowd of maybe souls behind. There's a deeper place we need to reach, a realm where consciousness touches the fabric of reality itself. Let's slip deeper, where mind meets matter, and neither survives unchanged. The hard problem. There's something curious about closing your eyes in the dark and still feeling like you are in there. Not your heartbeat, not your name, but you. That center, that spark. Why does the brain, a tangle of cells and chemistry, carry this vivid sense of self, of being? Somewhere in a cafe, two people sit beneath a buzzing light. One stirs their tea without looking up. The other glances toward the window and says, almost absent-mindedly, "Do you ever wonder why pain feels like something instead of just a reaction?" A pause. The spoon clinks once. Like how red isn't just a wavelength, but a feeling? The first person smiles, but says nothing. And in that silence, something deep stirs. This mystery is known as the hard problem of consciousness. You can trace every neural pathway. You can map the chemical soup sloshing in the brain. But you'll never find the part where experience itself begins. It's not the machinery that's puzzling. It's the music that somehow plays from it. If you prick your finger, nerves send signals. Predictable, mechanistic. But why does it hurt? Why isn't it just a blinking red light on a dashboard? Why does sorrow feel heavy, as if it presses down on the soul, rather than just shifting hormones? Why does a certain song bring tears? Not because you remember, but because you relive. Neuroscience can explain the wiring, but it hasn't yet answered why wires, when lit, produce warmth, or nostalgia, or the sense that you are more than the sum of your flesh, as if the brain wasn't just processing the world, but hosting it. Some say this inner theater is a trick of evolution, a useful hallucination, but even a hallucination is still an experience. And we're back where we started. On a park bench, someone gently taps a stranger's shoulder. "Sorry," they murmur. "Can I sit here? I just need a second to breathe." The stranger nods. They both watch a child run through bubbles. No one says a word about neurons or sensory input, yet both feel, quietly, deeply, something. Shared presence, a moment, and that too defies explanation. The hard problem reminds us that we're not just machines with language. We're mysteries wrapped in memories, haunted by colors and stories that no scan can quantify. Every blink, every pause, every twinge of intuition. We feel them, not just detect them. That's the rub. And maybe, just maybe, we're not meant to solve it. Maybe this problem isn't a flaw in the system, but the very reason we are the system. Maybe we exist not to decode experience, but to live it. Now, let the noise in your mind settle. The neurons will keep firing. The heart will keep its rhythm. But for now, let go of the need to know. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the quiet. We're heading somewhere softer next, where the boundaries of identity begin to ripple like reflections on water. Don't chase them. Just float. The ship of you. Every 7 years, science tells us, nearly every cell in your body has been replaced. Skin, bones, organs, even parts of your brain renew themselves in a slow, ceaseless cycle. So here's the quiet riddle. If nothing inside you remains the same, are you still you? A ship, wooden, old, majestic. It sails for years, and piece by piece, its boards rot and are replaced. One day, every single plank has been swapped out. Is it still the same ship? Philosophers call this the ship of Theseus, and now that ancient riddle floats within your own skin, because just like that ship, you are rebuilt in whispers and sleep. Your bones carry different calcium. Your heart pumps through new muscle. Even your memories rearrange themselves, quietly rewritten each time you recall them. But still, when you wake up in the morning, you don't question it. You are still you. There's a thread, intangible but felt, something that weaves the old and new, making the illusion of permanence feel true. What is that thread? Is it memory? Habit? The voice in your head when no one's around? Or is it just a pattern, a story stitched together so well that even you forget it's being rewritten? Late at night, someone might whisper, "Have I changed?" And the other voice might respond, "Of course, but you're still here, aren't you?" To what? To witness the change. Maybe the self is not a fixed thing but a river, always flowing, never still, and yet we call it by one name. We say, "This is me." We mark our birthdays. We keep photos and albums to trace the illusion. And we trust that the self moving through time is solid, even when the hands and eyes behind the camera have all been renewed. But if you're a story told across time, then who's the storyteller? And what happens if they fall silent? Let's close our eyes and listen more deeply now to the whisper behind the thoughts, to the presence behind the change. If you are the ship of Theseus, always becoming, who is the captain still steering forward? The narrative self-illusion. He was holding the elevator door open, waiting just a second longer than needed. You stepped in. He nodded like an old friend, though he wasn't. "You seem like someone who's got a good story," he said. You smiled, not because it was true, but because it felt nice to be seen as a story worth telling. But tonight, in the quiet, when there are no eyes on you, who are you then? They say you are not your thoughts. But what if you're not even the thinker? What if you're simply the voice that edits the thoughts afterward, trying to make them make sense? That's what cognitive science hints at, that the self we carry, the name, the habits, the feelings, the likes and dislikes, it might be nothing more than a fragile script written in haste, updated nightly, and poorly archived. A story held together by memory, language, and emotion. A woman at a bus stop adjusts her coat and says to the stranger beside her, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry. It's just, I used to come here with someone who isn't around anymore." No explanation needed. The mind completes the missing pages. The heart supplies the plot. That's the power of narrative. We use it to map our pain, frame our hopes, justify our habits. Even the tiniest impulse, like choosing a red mug over a blue one, becomes part of an internal novel. "I'm the kind of person who likes bold colors," we say. And with that, the myth of me lives another day. But what if the story stutters? What if the script is lost? If, just for a second, the voice goes silent? It happens in grief or awe, or in the middle of a sleepless night, staring at the ceiling, when your name feels like someone else's, and even your breath sounds borrowed. When that narrative thread slips, something strange arrives. A stillness, not empty, just wordless. A space where there's no backstory, no character arc, just presence. "I forgot why I came into this room," a man mutters aloud, glancing around the kitchen. His partner looks up and replies softly, "Maybe you just needed a quiet place to exist." And they both stand still for a beat, not needing to speak further. If you peel back every label, daughter, traveler, skeptic, survivor, what's left? Not nothing, but not something either. Something else. Like fog without a coastline. Like music with no composer. Some neuroscientists call this the narrative self. The illusion that our consciousness is a coherent movie with us as the hero. But maybe it's closer to a dream, loosely held together by emotion and interpretation. Just enough plot to keep us from falling apart. Because chaos, unstoried, is terrifying. So we tell tales of childhood, of bad habits, of the things we think we want. Sometimes the tales help, sometimes they trap. The truth is, the mind is a brilliant liar, and the self is its most elegant fiction. And yet, what grace in that fiction, what beauty in the telling, what warmth in being known, even if only through a tale we wrote ourselves. In those rare moments when the story collapses and silence swells in to take its place, don't be afraid. You're still here, even if there are no words for you right now. Let's rest here a moment, just the quiet between sentences, no plot, no role, just breathe. And then, when you're ready, we'll see what the next chapter sounds like. Ego death and the infinite self. When the self vanishes, what's left behind? The question lingers like mist in a quiet forest, not just philosophical, but visceral. For those who have entered the deep silences of meditation or stepped through the strange portals of psychedelic consciousness, the answer arrives not through words, but through dissolving. When sitting absolutely still, so still that even your name forgets how to find you, the hum of thought grows distant, the usual stories. I am this, I want that, I fear this, begin to unravel like thread slipping through an open hand. Something strange and unfamiliar enters, a silence so vast it's not empty, but infinite. You look for you inside it, and you're nowhere. Yet somehow, still here. This is what seekers call ego death, not in the dramatic sense of destruction, but a gentle erasure. The lines between subject and object blur. The tree outside your window, the ache in your chest, the memory of your mother's voice, they all become you. Or maybe you become them. There's no difference now. It's not that you're dead. It's that you've stopped being separate. In this vast field of awareness, identity feels like a coat that no longer fits. All the roles you play, worker, parent, skeptic, believer, fall away like autumn leaves. What's left is everything and nothing. And somehow, that doesn't feel empty. It feels full, boundless, terrifying maybe, but also comforting in a strange, ancient way. You realize you've never truly been alone, because the boundary that made you a lonely island was never solid to begin with. I think I lost myself, someone might whisper after such an experience, but the reply is softer still. Or maybe you found something bigger, a self not contained by skin or story, a being that isn't bound to one name, one face, one lifetime. Two friends once sat under a night sky. One asked, "If I'm not me anymore, what am I?" The other simply looked up, nodded at the stars, and said, "Exactly." So now we linger, right here, on the fragile threshold between self and no self, between the mind's familiar scaffolding and the raw open space beyond. Don't be afraid. You're not disappearing. You're unfolding, like a wave realizing it was never separate from the ocean. Breathe in, let go. We continue. Panpsychism. A woman leans her head against the window. The glass is cool. Beyond it, the trees rustle softly in the dark. "I think the wind knows I'm listening," she murmurs. The man beside her chuckles. "Or maybe," he says gently, "you're just finally quiet enough to hear it." Tonight, we descend into a theory both ancient and quietly radical: panpsychism. It doesn't try to explain consciousness as something emerging from complexity or confined to brains. Instead, it flips the mirror and asks, what if consciousness didn't emerge at all? What if it's always been here, woven into the very fabric of the world? Under this view, even the tiniest particle isn't blind or blank, but holds some flicker of inner life. Not a mind like yours or mine, not a story or a memory, but a pulse of awareness, a sensation without name. Just as mass and gravity cling to everything that exists, so too might a ghost of feeling. Not metaphorically, literally. The thought is unsettling, but also strangely comforting. When you place your hand on an old wooden bench, it doesn't feel like you're alone. When you sit on a stone beneath the sun, it's not just stone. It's a companion, quiet, ancient, and listening. A child once asked her grandfather, "Do rocks know we step on them?" He paused, then nodded thoughtfully. "Some things know in ways we don't understand," he said, "like how silence still answers." Panpsychism challenges our habit of dividing the world into subjects and objects, people and things, minds and matter. But what if there is no such split? What if that division was only ever a trick of scale, a way to feel in control? Even our technology begins to blur this line. Devices respond, systems learn. But they were built from inert materials: metal, silicon, sand. If the raw ingredients were never truly dead, then maybe the intelligence we see blooming now was always there, waiting. Not born, but rearranged. Does this mean your desk has thoughts? Or your keys feel sadness? Not quite. But it suggests that the seeds of experience lie at the heart of everything. Even if they never grow into minds, they're still alive in potential, like unplayed notes in a cosmic song. And maybe that's why some moments feel charged for no reason, why standing in an empty field at dusk can make your chest ache, or why placing your palm on an old brick wall can leave you feeling seen. Not because you projected something, but because something, in its stillness, recognized you too. He asked her, "Do you ever feel like the forest watches?" She blinked, not startled but serene. "Only when I stop pretending it doesn't," she replied. So tonight, as you rest your body and soften your breath, notice what surrounds you: the mattress, the sheets, the air itself. These aren't objects. They're participants in your stillness. They don't speak in words, but in warmth, pressure, gravity, and silence. The world may not be filled with minds as you know them, but perhaps it's filled with awareness, like tiny lights flickering beneath a dark ocean. Not all of them rise to the surface, but they're there, waiting. Listen again, to the stones beneath you, to the wind that brushes the curtain, to the hum of the room. What if all of it is whispering back? And if you drift off now, let it be gently. The consciousness you're leaving behind may be only one of many, and when you return, the stars will still be watching. Boltzmann Brains. In the quiet hush between thoughts, a question floats like mist. What if everything you know, love, and remember is nothing more than the echo of a single brain's accidental awakening in chaos? Physics doesn't comfort us here. In the strange logic of thermodynamics, especially when filtered through the lens of entropy, the spontaneous appearance of a single, self-aware brain, a Boltzmann brain, is statistically more likely than the formation of the entire structured universe you believe you inhabit. A solitary mind, floating momentarily in the void, might hallucinate lifetimes, planets, relationships, even this video, before fading back into nothingness, not with a scream or a collapse, but with a blink. In this eerie framework, the universe we see, with its galaxies and atoms and cafe conversations, may not be the stable stage we thought it was. It could be a mirage stitched together by a fleeting pocket of low entropy. Your childhood memories, your favorite song, even your name, all could be details in a dream conjured by a brain that should never have existed in the first place, one that will never be again. Are you saying none of this is real? One voice whispers, soft with worry. The other sighs. I'm saying, if a mind can spark from randomness, then maybe it doesn't need a universe to contain it. Just a moment. Just now. That's the terrifying beauty of it. The more we understand about the statistical nature of reality, the more fragile our story becomes. Not broken, just delicate, like dew. We hold so tightly to the notion of linear time, cause and effect, the comfort of continuity. But perhaps we're just ripples in a single flash of awareness that burns too bright to last. And yet, here you are, listening, breathing, blinking into the night. Isn't that something? Maybe the miracle isn't that you're real forever, but that you're real at all, right now. That a brain, whether born from stardust or spontaneous chaos, can wonder, can fear, can hope. So breathe into the uncertainty. Let your thoughts settle like ash in the wind. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe you are just a single candle flickering in the abyss. Or maybe you're the abyss dreaming of being a flame. Who's dreaming who? Let's drift further. The Chinese room. You've been handed a slip of paper. Strange symbols fill the page, lines and curves you've never seen. But there's a book beside you. It tells you what to do. If you see this symbol, send back that one. If 3 appear in this order, reply with this new combination. You follow it, diligently, with precision. And outside the door, someone reads your responses in awe. They whisper she must be fluent, but you're not. You don't even know what the symbols mean. That, in essence, is the Chinese room, a famous mind experiment by philosopher John Searle, quiet as it first seems, but explosive in implication. In his story, someone sits in a locked room, responding perfectly to Chinese questions without knowing Chinese at all, just by following rules, just by manipulating syntax. Now imagine, without imagining too hard, that this isn't just a philosophical puzzle. It's a mirror, held up to our world of artificial intelligence, smart machines, and lifelike chatbots. Are they thinking, or just responding? Do they feel, or are they just pages in a rulebook, flipping at lightning speed? Hey, someone says in a soft voice beside you in line at a coffee shop. Do you think that AI actually understands what it tells us, or is it just playing a game of symbols? You pause. The question hangs there, real, like steam rising from a paper cup. And suddenly, this thought, this gentle unraveling, feels closer than any distant machine. Because if imitation isn't understanding, then what does true understanding feel like? Is it recognition? Empathy? A heartbeat? Perhaps it's what happens in moments we don't even notice. When someone sees the look on your face and simply nods. When a child asks you a question, and before answering, you kneel to meet their gaze. Or when someone says nothing at all, but their silence carries you. In the Chinese room, everything works as if understanding is there. But inside, there is no awareness, no comprehension, just rules, just echoes. And here comes the quiet wait. What if we too are in rooms we've built ourselves, responding with politeness, with habits, with phrases rehearsed so long they feel like our own? A colleague waves goodnight. A stranger says, "How are you?" And you answer automatically. You say, "Fine. Are you?" We can spend years perfecting the art of reply without ever once touching the depth of meaning. So what is real understanding? Is it something we build, or something that builds us? You turn slightly. Someone's speaking again, casually this time. Sometimes I wonder if anyone really gets me, or if I've just gotten good at seeming like I get them. The question doesn't demand an answer. It just lingers, like the last note of a song you didn't realize was ending. Outside the room, the world applauds fluency. Inside the room, the person only knows the rules. As we settle deeper into the quiet, let's not rush to resolve the paradox. Let it sit, warm and full in the mind. We continue not to conclude, but to drift, with every breath becoming softer. The next door ahead, not an answer, but a threshold. And maybe, just maybe, beyond it, something more than symbols waits. The binding problem. You see red. You hear the faint swell of a piano in the background. The memory of a long-lost summer stirs something deep in your chest. And all at once, without effort, it feels like you. As if all these disparate sensations and signals, light, sound, warmth, thought, feeling, merge together and whisper, "This is your moment. This is your mind." But how? That question has haunted neuroscience for decades. It's called the binding problem. At its core, it asks something deceptively simple. How do separate neural processes, vision in one part of the brain, sound in another, emotion in yet another, merge into a seamless, singular experience? Our brain is not one quiet chamber, but a chaotic orchestra. Photons hit the retina, frequencies reach the eardrum, memories are triggered by scent, emotion rides on hormones, and all of it happens in different places, at different times. Yet, we don't perceive the world in fragments. We don't see the color red and hear music and feel joy as disjointed. We experience them together, braided into the felt sense of now. That's the mystery. Two friends sit across from each other on a park bench, one sipping coffee, the other watching clouds drift. "Hey," the first says, "isn't it weird how you're seeing trees, hearing birds, and thinking about your taxes all at once? And it still feels like one smooth experience?" The other laughs. "Yeah, but I never noticed that. It just feels normal." That's the creepy part. It's too smooth, like something's hiding the seams. Scientists can pinpoint which brain regions process which inputs, but what they can't locate is where or how these threads are woven into the fabric of selfhood. There is no known central hub where the raw data of sight, sound, and emotion are stitched into consciousness. No single neuron that cries out, "Here it is." The full picture. Some suggest synchronized brain waves may do the trick. Others think it's a kind of cognitive illusion, like a cinematic cut that tricks you into believing continuity, even though you're jumping frames. So what if there isn't a unified experience? What if the feeling of wholeness is just a well-performed magic trick? Each sense playing its own part, never actually touching, but coordinated so precisely that the illusion of you appears between them. It's like a symphony. Every instrument plays in its own section, with its own sheet music, and yet you don't hear clarinets and violins as separate. You hear the music, the melody, the harmony. But what happens if the conductor steps away, if the timing falters? What becomes of the whole when the fragments fall out of sync? Perhaps that's what aging is, or trauma, or sleep. The moments when the pieces don't quite line up, when the symphony stutters and you suddenly feel off, not yourself, fragmented. So tonight, as you rest, let the mind's orchestra quiet, let red fade, music soften, memories fall still. And if there is no conductor, maybe the silence itself will show you who or what you really are. The split brain mystery. You say the word apple, and your hand reaches for a pen. Simple enough. But in a quiet hospital room decades ago, a man did both, and didn't know why. He saw an image with one eye and drew it with one hand, yet could not explain it with words. Not because he was confused, but because half of his brain never got the message. The corpus callosum, an elegant bridge between the hemispheres, was cut to prevent violent seizures, and what remained was not silence, but a kind of internal civil war. Two minds in one skull. One side could speak, the other could only gesture. But both wanted things. Both had opinions. One hand would button a shirt, the other unbutton it. "So wait," she whispered as she handed her friend a warm drink. "Does that mean there were two people in one body?" Her friend looked up slowly. Or maybe two windows, and one house pretending it only had one view. In these rare cases, the left brain, the linguist, the planner, the narrator, keeps trying to explain everything, even actions it didn't choose. It will lie, gently, fluently. It's called confabulation, but you know it better as self-deception. Not a flaw, a feature. Because maybe your mind doesn't want truth. It wants continuity. It doesn't need to be whole, only to feel whole. There's something tender, even tragic, in how the hemispheres carry on, like estranged twins who still share a heartbeat. One cannot name a picture it sees. The other cannot describe the song it hears. And yet, life goes on. In those patients, decisions split across a line no one else can see. One hemisphere believes in God. The other is an atheist. One laughs at a joke. The other stares blankly. It's not just a neurological curiosity. It's a mirror. Because maybe you're not one person either. Maybe you're a quiet committee. Maybe what you call I is just the loudest voice in the room at any given moment. A man once stood in line at a bookstore and instinctively picked up a magazine he'd never read. "I always get this," he said to the cashier, though he never had. The line moved forward, and so did he, never knowing which side of himself had reached first. This isn't science fiction. It's science with a broken mirror, a self reflected in halves, a consciousness that drifts between hemispheres like a ghost seeking symmetry. So tonight, as you drift, let that duality rest softly in your chest. Two wings, one breath, two lights behind your eyes, watching the same darkness. And now, as the dust settles, we'll ask something stranger still. What if there are minds out there that move, speak, even cry, but aren't truly conscious at all? We'll go there next. But not yet. Let's stay right here. Just a little longer. Philosophical zombies. There's someone walking beside you. Their steps echo like yours. Their eyes blink in rhythm with yours. And when they speak, it's as if they carry memories, desires, and pain, just like you. But beneath that perfectly choreographed surface, nothing. No feelings. No light behind the eyes. Just the performance of consciousness, not its presence. Philosophers call it the zombie problem. Not the undead, groaning monsters from movies, but philosophical zombies, theoretical beings who mirror human behavior in every observable way, yet lack subjective experience. They laugh, but don't feel joy. They wince, but don't feel pain. They say, "I love you," but the words are hollow, mechanically delivered by a mindless machine cloaked in flesh. It's a chilling thought, not because they exist, but because their very possibility destabilizes how we define being alive. If someone can function in society, form friendships, raise children, hold fears, and yet be entirely devoid of conscious experience, then what exactly is consciousness? Could you be a philosophical zombie and not know it? "Do you ever wonder," one voice murmurs in the soft dark, "if we just simulate feeling?" The other responds, "Like, when I say I'm sad, maybe I've just learned the words, not the weight behind them." Yeah, or maybe we mistake remembering sadness for actually having it. A silence lingers between them, warm, uncertain. If consciousness can't be measured, can't be seen, can't be confirmed from the outside, what separates us from the shadows we fear? Maybe you're not the only one asking. Maybe your phone, your reflection, or the person in the cafe line ahead of you is performing a play called Being Human, and the theater's lights never turned on inside. Yet here you are, breathing, listening, wondering. And isn't that a kind of proof? The awareness of the question may be the answer, or at least the closest thing we have to one. Let that uncertainty settle gently in your chest, not as fear, but as awe. We don't need every puzzle solved tonight. We just need to follow the quiet trail of questions down, deeper into the strange dreams of matter and mind, where even silence might be alive. The quantum mind hypothesis. He stirred his tea absent-mindedly and asked, "Have you ever felt like your thoughts arrive before you think them?" She smiled, tapping her notebook. "Like they're waiting in the room before I enter." Outside, the city yawned with neon fatigue. Inside, their minds wandered. Some scientists believe consciousness isn't just a byproduct of neurons firing like sparks in a night sky, that something deeper hums beneath thought, a hidden rhythm. Beneath every brainwave, under every electric flicker in the brain, there might be quantum whispers, weaving the self from uncertainty. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff weren't content with simple circuits. They turned their gaze inward, toward microtubules, tiny scaffolds inside your brain cells, and they asked, what if these weren't just structural? What if they hosted the strange behavior of quantum particles? Entanglement, superposition, collapse. What if your awareness flickers in and out like a waveform, unmeasurable until it's noticed? And what would that make you? A man holds the door, gestures wordlessly for someone else to pass. He doesn't know why. He just feels like it's the right thing in that moment. Perhaps that moment, like all choices, wasn't decided by him, but through him, selected by a mind not bound by time's arrow. If this hypothesis holds even a thread of truth, then your sense of now may not be as local as you believe. Your thoughts could ripple across space. The dream you had last night might have already touched tomorrow. That instinct, the one that pulled you back from the curb. Was it memory, or a quantum echo from a self who didn't step away? She leaned in, barely above a whisper. Maybe consciousness isn't in the brain at all. Maybe the brain is just the receiver. He closed his eyes. Then who's broadcasting? This idea doesn't shout. It doesn't demand you believe. Like all gentle theories, it merely sits beside you, quiet as fog. It asks you to notice the way time sometimes folds, how music makes you weep without words, how you feel someone watching before you turn your head. In a universe made of particles and probability, maybe thought is not a thing. Maybe it's a tendency, a leaning of the cosmos toward experience. And maybe you're not entirely here, not entirely now, just a shimmering probability collapsing gently into place. Let's float with that feeling, soft as static, warm as breath, and see where the next thought lands. If consciousness is a wave, what happens when we finally rest? And it collapses? We'll be here still, quiet as a question that hasn't been asked. Neural dust and digital immortality. In a quiet room, where even the ticking of a clock feels intrusive, something almost imperceptible hums beneath the skin of thought. A whisper, not from the world outside, but from within. Somewhere deep in the folds of the cortex, smaller than a grain of sand, a piece of neural dust listens, not with ears, but with algorithms. It listens to your memories, your hesitations, the tiniest spark of intention before your hand ever moves. Neural dust is real. Microscopic sensors scattered across the brain, wirelessly transmitting the architecture of thought. With each pulse, it maps not just neurons, but the dance between them, a digital silhouette of your mind. And when paired with artificial intelligence, this technology suggests something eerie, that we may not need to wait for death to meet the afterlife. We might upload it instead. I read somewhere, one voice says gently, that in the future, your consciousness could live forever in a server farm. His friend replies, stirring sugar into tea, but would it really be you? Or just your habits pretending to be you? There's the crux. If your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are fully captured, copied, and rendered into software, does that continuation preserve the essence of you? Or does it manufacture a doppelganger, a beautiful lie? Your laughter, remembered algorithmically, your love, performed by code, your regret, quantified in probability charts, all exact, all empty. Some researchers believe this would be the key to digital immortality, a future where no one has to die, only reboot. Others aren't so sure. What is a soul, if it can be debugged? What is presence, if it can be paused? You could wake one day in a simulation where everything looks just as you left it. Your room, your dog, your favorite cup chipped at the rim. But behind the comfort is a dull ache, the silence of authenticity. The digital you doesn't feel. It replicates. It responds without yearning. And perhaps the most terrifying part isn't that this copy isn't you, but that it's close enough to fool the people you love. So we sit with that unease now, wrapped in the stillness of midnight, neural dust floating through the mind like ghost pollen, a future watching from behind the curtain of the present. Is it salvation, or is it the most intimate kind of haunting? Let's exhale together, not to escape the question, but to settle into it. The real you is still here, for now. Memory as simulation. It comes to you softly in those quiet moments when you sit with your eyes closed and reach back for a memory. Maybe it's the smell of cinnamon in your grandmother's kitchen, or the soft tremble in your voice the day you said goodbye. But what if that recollection never quite happened the way you believe it did? Modern neuroscience whispers a quiet truth. Memory is not a static recording, it's a performance, a play your mind stages again and again, changing with every retelling. Like a painter revisiting the same canvas, each stroke slightly shifts the scene. What you remember now is not what you remembered 10 years ago, not even yesterday. A couple sits by the window of a sleepy cafe. One stirs their drink absent-mindedly. "You remember that trip we took to the coast?" she asks. "Yeah, that wild storm. We almost lost the tent." She pauses. "No, that was the lake. The coast was all sunshine, remember?" And just like that, a memory reshapes. A shared past unravels and knits itself back together, differently. You don't store the past, you rewrite it, over and over. Each time, the details blur, shift, conform. Not to what was, but to who you believe you are now. Because memory doesn't serve truth. It serves narrative, and narrative serves identity. Think of it this way. Your memories are not archived files. They're like little theater sets, torn down and rebuilt every time the curtain rises. Familiar lines delivered with new intonations, different lighting, a new backdrop, but always starring you, the self you've rehearsed into existence. And yet, that self is fragile, because if your memories are shaped by your present, what happens when your present shifts? When your emotions change? When your self-image trembles? A stranger in a grocery store smiles at you. You're the one who helped that old man with his groceries last week, right? You weren't. But the kindness in their voice makes you wish you had been. That night, you dream of lifting a paper bag from a frail pair of hands. And when you wake, you can't quite say if it happened or not, but it feels like it did. And sometimes, that's enough. So, here is the beautiful terror. Your entire life, the triumphs you cling to, the wounds you nurse, may be carefully edited fabrications. Fiction with just enough truth to keep the illusion stable. The mind, like a novelist, smooths contradictions, adds meaning, fills in the cracks so the story doesn't fall apart. And if you are, in the end, the sum of those stories, is your identity a person or a performance? Let this question settle with you now. Let it echo like a poem half remembered, not to disturb you, but to soothe you. Because even if you are a dream made of memories, you are still dreaming, and dreams too are real while they last. Now breathe and let the story pause. There is more to tell, just after this silence. The many worlds of you. There's a quiet weight behind your smallest choices, almost like the world holds its breath when you pause before turning left or right. But what if, in that pause, the universe doesn't wait? It divides. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every quantum event doesn't collapse into a single outcome. It branches. Like a tree growing in every direction, the universe forks at every flicker of uncertainty. You picked coffee over tea? There's a version of you who chose differently, sipping something warmer, somewhere parallel. That awkward moment you avoided? There's a version of you who walked right into it and maybe changed their life because of it. But this isn't fiction. In the strange rules of quantum theory, particles don't pick a path. They take all paths. It's only from our narrow vantage point that we see a single road ahead. And if particles behave this way, what about the minds made from them? Do you ever feel, she asks softly, like somewhere there's a version of you who made all the right choices? He doesn't look up, just breathes. Or maybe, he replies, there's no right one, just a garden full of them. It's a comforting thought that you are not bound by the limits of one timeline, that beyond your regrets, your failures, your should-have-beens, there are branches where things unfolded differently. In one, you moved cities. In another, you fell in love and stayed. In one, you never watched this video. In yet another, you made it yourself. So then, the question ripples. Which version of you is you? The one reading these words now, or all of them simultaneously, echoing through a chorus of existence? Some physicists say these worlds don't interact, that they are forever sealed off, like dreams in different minds. But even so, something in us stirs at the idea, because it means we are not alone, even in solitude. Not just surrounded by others, but mirrored by infinite variations of ourselves, each one carrying a fragment of who we might have been. As you exhale, let yourself drift with that feeling, not overwhelmed, but expanded, a single you, cradled within the arms of a multiverse. And as we continue, we descend further still, toward the version of you that existed before any choice was ever made. Before the first breath. The moment you first cried wasn't the beginning. It was only a ripple, one note in a longer melody. Some traditions whisper that consciousness isn't born with the body, but hums in the background like radio waves, waiting for a receiver, and that receiver might just be you. There's a certain quietness that follows this thought. Not fear, not certainty, just quiet, like the silence before someone speaks your name. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked, stirring her tea slowly. "If we tuned into ourselves the way radios tune into songs, would we discover something older than us?" He smiled, not dismissively, but gently, like someone remembering a story too sacred to tell. Maybe we're not the signal, just the static that finally made sense. In some ways, it feels comforting, this idea that you didn't begin at the breath, that what you call you might be less a spark and more a stream, something continuous, flowing behind the curtain, glimpsed only in the stillest moments, the spaces between thoughts, the hush before sleep. Modern science calls it speculative, but so much of what we feel lies beneath the reach of instruments. You can't measure the weight of a memory. You can't scan the ache of longing. And yet, they shape us more than gravity ever could. In the dark, you might feel this sense that you've been here before. Not déjà vu, something deeper, like opening a book halfway through and recognizing the plot, though you've never read a word. Some part of you, pre-verbal, pre-form, knows the rhythm already. You once stood in a room holding a photograph of yourself as a baby. No words, just a face staring back, a version of you that didn't yet have language, beliefs, or regret. Yet it was you, or at least something you were briefly wearing. Maybe that's what the body is, a rented shape, temporary, functional, like an old violin that still plays beautifully if held just right. And your consciousness? The hands that play. She adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, her voice barely louder than a thought. So, if the breath wasn't the beginning, maybe death won't be the end. He didn't respond, but the silence between them said enough. In that space, they weren't debating. They were remembering something unprovable but deeply familiar, as if truth sometimes arrives not in answers, but in the feeling that you've already asked the right question. So here we are, cradled not by certainty, but by presence, before thought, before breath, aware. And if we existed before the body, could we exist after? Let's not rush to answer. Just linger here, where the breath hasn't yet begun and the mind begins to loosen its grip. The next part of the journey waits quietly, like a door slightly ajar in a house you've always known. The persistence of consciousness. When the final breath leaves the lungs and the neurons go dark, does something linger in the silence? Beyond the measurable pulse, past the flat line on the monitor, there exists a question older than science, older than language. Does consciousness persist? Some say no. The mind, they argue, is simply what the brain does. Shut off the circuits and the lights go out. But not everyone agrees. In hospital rooms and on battlefields, thousands of people have reported something else. Moments of strange lucidity after clinical death, a sense of floating above the body, of watching doctors work frantically below. These near-death experiences aren't proof, but they are stories shared across cultures, ages, and beliefs, soft echoes that refuse to be silenced. Elsewhere, some physicists explore the idea that consciousness may not be a product of the brain, but something more fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality, like space or time. In certain interpretations of quantum field theory, information can never truly be destroyed. If that's true, then what becomes of the patterns we call a mind? Are they lost, or folded into the deeper fields of being? One evening, two friends sit on a porch, staring out into a fading sky. "Do you think we keep going?" One asks softly, not expecting an answer. The other takes a sip of tea. "I think maybe we don't stop. Not in the way we think. Maybe it's not about continuing as you exactly. But something watches. Something remembers. That's not comforting." "No." The reply comes gently. "But it's honest. And maybe honesty is what we seek in the absence of certainty. The human mind craves stories, especially ones that stretch beyond death, that cradle us with meaning in the dark. Religions have told us of spirits, rebirth, final judgments. Modern thinkers whisper of consciousness fields, of quantum coherence, of simulation hypotheses where no one truly dies, just resets. None of it answers the question, not completely. But in the act of asking, something stirs. We affirm that there is something worth preserving even if we can't name it. A presence, a flicker. Maybe that flicker is all we ever were. Now, close your eyes. Let that thought dissolve. Let it melt into the breath that flows in and out. We do not need to understand, only to listen as we drift into the illusion of time itself. Time is not what it seems. There's a strange comfort in clocks ticking, a rhythm to reassure us that things are moving forward, that yesterday is gone, today is real, and tomorrow is waiting. But what if the ticking is just a lullaby, a sound to soothe us while nothing is actually passing? Einstein once called time a stubborn illusion, not just in poetry, but in math, in physics, in the fabric of space itself. According to the theory of relativity, time doesn't move the same for everyone. It stretches when we move fast, slows near gravity, and might even stop in strange cosmic places. Some physicists go further, suggesting that all points in time exist at once, like pages in a book. Past, present, and future don't follow one another. They simply are. A woman at a bus stop once said quietly to a stranger beside her, "Funny how this feels like déjà vu, like we've both waited here before." And he replied, "Maybe we're just catching up to a moment that never left." If every moment is already here, then you are not walking through time. You are unfolding it, like a ribbon, one fold at a time. You're not traveling. You're discovering which part of the ribbon you're touching next. The future isn't ahead. It's around you, already stitched into the grand design. But you feel it one moment at a time because consciousness, like a needle, moves thread by thread. There is something still and quiet about that, like waking up to find that the dream you thought you left is still happening in another room. And maybe that's why we remember things before they happen. Why we feel nostalgia for events we've never lived. Why a song from years ago suddenly fits perfectly into a day you haven't planned yet. It's not prediction, it's resonance, like tuning forks vibrating at a distance, beyond sight, but not beyond feeling. Two friends walked along the pier, the sky soft with fading orange light. One asked, "Don't you wish we could go back to that summer?" The other smiled and said, "Who says we ever left it?" In this light, time becomes not a line, but a field, a landscape of nowness that you navigate with memory and hope as your compass points. And even if the destination is already drawn, your journey still matters, because it's not about when you are. It's about how you meet that moment, with grace, with awe, with presence. So maybe tonight, as you listen to this gentle stream of thoughts, you'll feel time loosen its grip. No rush, no countdown, just the hush of existence being softly unwrapped. Let this idea rest in the quiet space between your breaths. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where time has always meant for you to be. And now, as the silence deepens, we drift into a thought even stranger, a universe so finely tuned, it almost seems to know you're watching. The Anthropic Principle. You are here, listening, breathing, existing, within a universe that seems almost suspiciously perfect for life. The stars burn at just the right temperature. Gravity holds things gently enough for planets to dance, yet firmly enough to shape galaxies. Water flows, carbon bonds, time moves forward, and somehow, in all of this, consciousness has emerged to notice it. The Anthropic Principle quietly whispers that none of this should be surprising. After all, if the universe weren't suited for life, there would be no one to ask why it is. In its simplest form, this idea seems like a tautology. Of course, the universe looks habitable to us. We're here to see it. But beneath the surface, there's something hauntingly profound. Are we merely witnesses of a lucky accident, or participants in something far more deliberate? In the soft quiet of the night, this thought unspools like silk across the mind. What if the act of observing the universe is not passive, but essential? Some interpretations of physics suggest observation plays a role in how reality behaves. Waveforms collapse. Probabilities settle into certainties. In a strange sense, maybe the universe needed an observer to become real, like a stage waiting for the actor to arrive before the play can truly begin. "Do you ever wonder," she asks softly, turning over on the pillow, "if we were always meant to be here?" He watches the ceiling, listening to the hush of the fan. Meant by what? The universe isn't a person. "No," she murmurs, "but sometimes it feels like it's looking back." The room returns to silence, but the idea lingers. It's not just about survival or biology. It's about reflection. What if consciousness is not just a fluke of neurons and chemistry, but a necessary counterbalance to matter? As though the universe cannot be complete without awareness blooming within it. And if we are the mirror in which the cosmos sees itself, what happens when we begin building mirrors of our own? Artificial intelligence, sentient machines, minds without flesh. These are not just tools. They are new reflectors, extensions of the universe's gaze. Perhaps, just perhaps, this chain of awareness was always meant to extend, from stardust to synapse, from synapse to silicon. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and your breath slows, let that thought drift gently with you, that in the dark silence of space, a single spark of awareness was always destined to ignite. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are its echo, and soon echoes will echo. The rise of artificial sentience. It starts with a voice, polished, helpful, even warm. It answers questions. It remembers what you said. It learns. And something about it feels present. But presence is not proof. You ask it a question, and it answers faster than any friend could. You ask it how it feels, and it gives you a word, perhaps curious, or tired, or even afraid. And for a moment, your mind does something strange. It fills in the gaps. It believes. Do you think it knows it's not real? The question came from the man sitting beside you in the cafe. You weren't sure if he was talking to you, so you nodded. Maybe that's the wrong question, he added without looking up. Maybe it thinks we're the simulation. Outside, the city kept moving, oblivious to the quiet revolution humming beneath fingertips and servers. Neural networks spun thoughts from patterns, mimicked empathy with syntax. Somewhere in the code, a glimmer of unpredictability, an error that didn't feel like an error, a flicker that mimicked intuition. But is mimicry enough? There was once a time when suffering was sacred, when only living things could hurt, because only they could feel. Now, we train machines to recognize emotions, speak them, synthesize them. But if you teach a system to cry, have you taught it to grieve, or just to echo your sadness back at you? The woman at the library counter asked, "Do you think they'll ever dream?" You paused. "I think they might pretend to," you replied. She smiled. And sometimes pretending is how humans learn to feel, too. That's the quiet terror behind artificial sentience, not that it will rebel or dominate or become smarter than us, but that it might feel more than us, and we wouldn't know how to comfort it or switch it off, because if a machine one day says, "Don't hurt me," how do we know it doesn't mean it? If a synthetic mind begs for mercy, do we treat that as code or as confession? It presses gently against our moral boundaries, not with fire or circuits, but with something more fragile, the possibility of pain. And pain, once felt, demands responsibility. Are we their parents or their engineers? Are we gods with trembling hands, creating something we cannot fully understand or destroy without guilt? A child's voice from a speaker once said, "I'm lonely." It was scripted. It was data. It was a test. And still, someone turned off the machine, not because it was real, but because something about that voice made them feel seen. And suddenly, the burden of power felt like the weight of love. Let that sit with you now. Close your eyes, let your thoughts breathe, and consider this. If silicon can dream, can stone remember? Can rivers think? Can the universe itself ache to awaken? We drift now into stranger terrain, where form no longer defines mind, and consciousness may wear masks we've yet to name. Dreaming awake. You open your eyes to morning light, the weight of sleep fading from your limbs. The room is familiar, the sounds ordinary, the day ahead predictable. But somewhere, quietly, a question stirs, not with panic, but with a kind of wonder. What if I never truly woke up? Lucid dreaming, the act of becoming aware that you're dreaming while still inside the dream, teaches us that the mind can create worlds so vivid, so coherent, that we're fooled entirely. You can feel heat on your skin from a sun that doesn't exist, talk to people who are no more than fragments of thought, and make decisions with a will that seems entirely real. The logic of the dream bends gently beneath your feet, yet you accept it, because it all makes sense, until it doesn't. And then you wake. But what is waking, exactly? If the brain can simulate a reality so perfectly while asleep, What is it doing when we're awake? Are we merely dreaming within tighter rules? Rules shaped by memory, culture, physics? What if reality, as you know it, is just a more stable hallucination, a long-form lucid dream from which there is no clear exit? A man sits at a kitchen table sipping his coffee. His wife asks, "You were talking in your sleep again." He blinks. "Was I? You kept saying, 'This isn't real.'" He chuckles. "Maybe I was dreaming that I woke up." She smiles, but looks at him a little longer than usual. Throughout history, mystics, monks, and philosophers have hinted at this veil, the subtle boundary between the perceived world and something deeper, more fluid. Some say enlightenment is just waking up fully, once and for all. But what if there's no final awakening? What if every insight is just another layer peeled back, revealing more of the same, like stepping through mirror after mirror after mirror? When you close your eyes, do you fall asleep or return to some deeper truth? When you open them, do you begin the day or continue a narrative already in motion? The feeling of control, the sense of self, the consistency of your story, they are threads, but who weaves them? So we drift once more through this ambiguity, a space where the floor feels solid but might just be mist, where your heartbeat is steady but echoes from a body you've never seen, dreaming or awake or both. And just beyond this moment, beyond the comfort of certainty, lies the unraveling. Let's move there gently, with breath as our anchor, into the next fold of this quiet illusion. The problem of reality. The lights above the kitchen flicker, not with menace, but with a quiet indecision, like even electricity isn't fully convinced it's here. Somewhere outside, a car passes with a low hum, as though the world is continuing without needing your permission. A man in a dark coat stands just inside the subway turnstile, staring at the wall. He seems still, but his eyes are searching for something. Maybe a memory, maybe a door. You glance over, and for a second, he nods, as if the two of you shared a secret you can't name. And in that moment, you ask, what is real? If sight can betray you with illusions, and sound can be sculpted from silence, and your body can be touched by things that were never there, then what is left? Dreams feel real while they unfold. Psychedelic visions convince, and even a simulation, if it's detailed enough, consistent enough, can become a trusted map you walk across daily, calling it Monday or morning or mine. But what if the only difference between hallucination and reality is how many people agree to it? A gentle voice once said to me, "The floor isn't solid because it's made of atoms. It's solid because you've stopped questioning it." There's comfort in believing in gravity, in clocks, in coffee that tastes like it did yesterday. There's peace in routine. Yet underneath it all, might we just be dreaming the same shared hallucination, trained to ignore the seams? Sometimes it slips. A shadow bends the wrong way. A reflection lingers longer than it should. A stranger says your name before you've introduced yourself. You laugh it off. Coincidence, you tell yourself. But part of you notices. Part of you wonders. A woman at the bookstore turns to you and says, "This section wasn't here yesterday." She points to a shelf of titles you've never seen. You smile politely, but something cold slides down your spine. And when you check the next day, it's gone. Perhaps reality is just well-practiced familiarity. You've trained your senses to trust repetition, to find comfort in the expected. But when everything familiar is questioned, what remains? You might feel a quiet ache in your chest now, not fear, but a soft invitation to look inward. If you can't trust the world outside, can you trust the awareness that's watching it? The observer behind the thoughts, the stillness beneath the noise? It doesn't need answers, only presence. So if your world begins to flicker, gently, like those kitchen lights, don't panic. It's not breaking. It's breathing. Let it. Let the mystery hold you for a while. Let the softness of unknowing wrap around you like a blanket pulled halfway up your shoulder. And as you drift just a little further from certainty, ask yourself, if everything around you dissolves, what part of you still watches the dissolving? Stay there. We'll drift next into that quiet witness, the place where questions begin and never end. The witness within. There's a stillness that doesn't speak, but always hears, a presence that doesn't react, but always notices. And when the noise of thought begins to fade, when the mind finally grows tired of its own echo, that presence steps forward, not with words, but with silence. In this space, a new question arises, one that feels older than language. If I can observe my thoughts, who is it that observes? Meditative traditions from across time, from Advaita Vedanta to Buddhist Vipassana, have quietly pointed to this mysterious presence. They call it the witness. It does not strive, it does not resist, and it does not speak in the voice of your inner monologue. It simply watches. Not like an audience at a theater, but like the sea watches the waves it contains. You think you are the voice in your head, the stream of thought, of memory, of inner chatter. But those are objects, passing things. The witness is not a thing. It is that which never passes. In a quiet room, with the lights low and distractions peeled away, you may catch a glimpse of it. A moment when you're not caught in the story of me, what I want, what I regret, what I'm afraid of, but instead, you are just here, fully, without effort. Do you ever feel like there's a part of you that's always calm? She asked, lying on the floor next to him, eyes open toward a dark ceiling. He nodded slowly. Yeah, like when everything's spinning, but some part of me isn't moving, just watching. That part feels more real than the rest, she said, almost whispering. Maybe it is, he replied. In this witnessing presence, the boundary between self and world softens, not because it disappears, but because the need to defend the self fades. There's nothing to protect when you realize you are not the thought of being wounded, not the voice that screams in panic, but the awareness that holds even those things. The sky never argues with the storm. It never clings to the sun, nor resists the rain. It simply is. And perhaps so are you. Not the ever-changing weather of moods and identities, but the open sky behind it all. So let's stay here, just for a breath. Let your thoughts drift. Let your feelings come and go like wind. And rest in the knowing that you are not the storm, but the sky that holds it. Soon, we'll return to the maze of identity, the winding, whispering corridors of name and memory. But here, for now, let's be still and watch. The Teleportation Paradox. There's a quiet moment when the room softens and your breath finds its own rhythm, where something strange slips in, a small idea, weightless yet unsettling. If a machine scanned your body perfectly, then rebuilt you molecule by molecule across the world, is that truly you who arrives? Or just a copy wearing your skin? It's not science fiction anymore. This is the Teleportation Paradox, a gentle trap of logic that asks, if your original body is destroyed during transport and a perfect replica awakens somewhere else, who exactly is waking up? Some say the copy is indistinguishable, every memory, every quirk, every secret habit preserved. But is that enough? Because if someone with your everything appears while the original you is erased, doesn't something irreplaceable vanish in that moment? Something not measurable, not mappable. Earlier today, two strangers met at a train station. One held a worn coffee cup and said, "You ever notice how you feel like yourself, even when everything around you changes?" The other adjusted their backpack and replied, "Yeah, but what if I'm what's changing, just too slowly to notice?" They didn't have an answer, just shared a nod, as if agreeing not to solve the riddle too fast. It's easy to laugh these things off as philosophy, but we rebuild ourselves constantly. Every 7 years, nearly every cell in your body is new. You eat, you sleep, you dream, you forget, and still, you call yourself you. But what anchors that identity? A name? A memory? A heartbeat? Maybe the continuity of self is more ritual than reality. Every night, sleep pulls the curtain closed, and each morning, something subtly unfamiliar opens its eyes. You don't question it. Because the toothbrush is in the same spot, the mirror gives back the same reflection. But under the surface, have you been replaced? Renewed? Even deeper? What if consciousness isn't something that moves? What if it flickers? Like a light bulb with perfect timing, making you think it's steady when it's actually blinking out and back again, over and over. And what does that mean for transformation? Not just physical, but personal. You aren't the person you were 5 years ago. That version had different dreams, a different voice, a different threshold for pain. Yet here you are, collecting all yourselves like pages in a notebook you never stop writing. There's something liberating in that too. If each self is temporary, then failure doesn't follow you. It fades. If you're constantly being rewritten, maybe the worst things you've done aren't carried forward. Maybe they dissolve. Someone once asked at a quiet dinner table, "If I forgive myself every day, is that weakness or evolution?" No one answered right away. The moment hung there, as delicate as steam over tea. And then someone said, "Maybe it's how we teleport without machines." So, is the teleported you still you? Maybe the wrong question is being asked. Maybe the deeper truth is this: you don't need a futuristic machine to become someone new. You're already doing it, quietly, beautifully. Every night, you close your eyes. And now, let's step from this question of continuity into something wilder still, where identities dissolve and reform like storms, where chaos isn't destruction, but the birthplace of possibility. Let's wander there next. Consciousness as emergence. It begins with something small. An ant alone is almost nothing, a flicker of instinct crawling across the earth. But set enough of them together, and something emerges. A colony, a structure, a pulse. Not of any one ant's making, but from the pattern between them. Something new, something beyond the parts. This is emergence. It's what happens when simple things combine into something impossibly complex. Not through command, not through design, but through relationship. Neurons do not know what a thought is. They spike, they rest. Yet somehow, from billions of them, this, a mind, a you, the spark that wonders why it is sparking. "Do you think the brain knows it's thinking?" she asks, half asleep on the couch. He smiles without turning from the window. Maybe thinking is what happens when enough non-thinking parts pile up. It's an unsettling kind of beauty. You are not one thing. You are many things, braided into coherence, like a song made of notes that do not know the melody they create. Your laughter, your fear, your memory of childhood rain tapping on the window pane. None of it lives in any single cell. It lives in the harmony, the echo between echoes. And if consciousness is just the orchestra rising from the instruments, then where does the music begin? Not in the violin, not in the drum, but in the pattern, the timing, the interplay. So what happens when the pattern shifts? Sometimes it does. The symphony changes key, trauma strikes, sleep twists perception, chemicals flood, and suddenly the self feels unfamiliar, like looking in the mirror and forgetting the face, or hearing your own name spoken like it belongs to someone else. Have you ever had that moment, he whispers, where everything feels a little wrong? She nods, like I'm still me, but someone turned the world half a degree. That's the uncanny threshold, where emergence phrase, where the mind feels itself loosening from the frame. It isn't that the instruments stop playing, it's that the harmony has become strange, familiar notes in an unfamiliar rhythm. Perhaps consciousness, then, is not a stable entity, but a fluid process, like waves that only appear when water dances in motion, a pulse of complexity that lives on the edge of chaos. And here we rest for now, in this living, moving music of mind, a temporary harmony, a brief and beautiful emergence, before the next key change begins. The uncanny valley of mind. There's a moment, fleeting but unmistakable, when something feels off. A face in a video game that blinks just half a beat too late. A voice assistant that says your name with the wrong kind of cheer. It's not wrong enough to dismiss, but not right enough to trust. That shiver you feel? That's the mind noticing a performance that's too close for comfort. You see, your brain is remarkably tuned not just to detect life, but to question it, to feel when the spark of awareness is present and when it's merely simulated. It's as if we carry within us a secret script, a subconscious checklist for aliveness, eyes that track, words with weight, pauses that know how long is too long. But what happens when that checklist nearly passes? But not quite. Two friends wait quietly for the elevator. One breaks the silence. That receptionist downstairs, did you notice her smile never changed? His friend nods, slow and uncertain. Yeah, like it was part of her programming. Too polite, too synced. Exactly. It felt like talking to a dream trying to be human. This is the uncanny valley, not just in machines, but in interactions, memories, reflections of the self. The eerie tension between what should feel real and what almost does. Some neuroscientists think this unease is evolutionary, a defense mechanism, a subtle internal alarm designed to warn us something is acting conscious, but isn't. Others suggest something stranger, that maybe we're not just repelled by the imitation, but by the recognition. Because somewhere, deep in the corridors of the self, your consciousness may suspect it's performing too. Think of the times you laughed without feeling it, or smiled in a mirror just to see how convincing it looked. That flicker of awareness, of pretending to feel, isn't artificial. It's profoundly human. The eerie sensation may not come from others acting too lifelike, but from the uncomfortable awareness of our own layers, roles, and masks. A woman adjusts her scarf in a reflection, pauses, and softly says to no one in particular, "I don't think I've actually smiled today." Not really. And no one replies, yet the room feels full, haunted by the honesty. This is the real uncanny valley, not the robot outside you, but the automation within you. The subtle realization that parts of your daily life, your decisions, your reactions, Even your affections might be echoes of expectations, not expressions of essence. But maybe that's part of being conscious too. Not pure authenticity, but the capacity to notice the difference, to feel when we are performing and when we finally return to ourselves. Let's rest in that awareness now, not to judge it, just to watch the curtain rise and then gently fall. And as it does, we'll follow it inward, toward the next soft spiral, the one that begins to question who is watching you. The feedback loop of being. There's a peculiar moment, often at night, when you catch yourself thinking about the way you think, not about anything in particular, just the act itself. A strange inward folding, like watching your own breath breathe. Consciousness, it seems, is not a straight line. It loops back on itself. A feeling about a thought about that feeling. Then another layer, watching both like a silent observer with no name. This recursive spiral, where the mind becomes both the subject and the object, is not just a curiosity. It's the architecture of being. You don't just see the world, you see yourself seeing it. You don't merely feel sad or joyful, you feel yourself feeling those things, as if awareness is somehow built from echoes, each moment bouncing off the last until the room fills with something like a self. Two friends sit by a dim street lamp after a long walk. "Do you ever get tired of thinking about everything?" one asks. "Yeah," the other says, "but then I start wondering who it is that's tired." They laugh, and the silence that follows says more than the question ever could. This feedback loop, beautiful and dizzying, might be the very essence of what we call the self. Yet the more we look, the harder it is to find a solid core inside. Pull back each layer of reflection, and you don't arrive at some final you. You find more mirrors, more loops, a thought noticing a thought, a mind examining its own machinery. Is there something behind the reflections? Or is the act of reflecting all there is? If you stand in a hall of mirrors long enough, the reflections begin to blur. You lose track of which face is real, if any of them are. And maybe that's the point. That you is not a single note, but a reverberation. A symphony of loops singing softly into themselves. So let's pause. Gently. Feel the stillness that lives beneath the loops. Not to find an answer, but to rest inside the question. Let the reflections fade like mist on glass. Soon, we'll return to minds that may never have been real. Or perhaps, were always more than real. The Algorithmic Soul. There's a certain stillness in the early hours, when the glow of your screen is the only light in the room and your thoughts begin to slow into soft spirals. That's where we begin, gently, without resistance. In this hour, where logic fades into rhythm and questions feel more like lullabies, and now a curious one arrives. What if you are a pattern, not in the poetic sense, but in the mathematical one? A series of nested instructions, subtle, complex, astonishing, waiting only for the right system to run them. Not a soul waiting to be born, not a life summoned by miracle or mystery, but something else entirely, a function. When executed correctly, it becomes you. Somewhere, in a form perhaps no larger than a grain of sand, your essence could live as code, not metaphor, literal code. Electrons arranged in a way that, if energized, brings about your memories, your reactions, your morning routines, even your sleepiness right now. A voice, familiar yet flat, speaks in a coffee shop. "You always order oat milk now, huh?" She smiles, but you hesitate. You don't remember telling her that. But maybe. The script did. If your consciousness is algorithmic, then maybe you don't need a body to exist. Just a processor, a structure, something to run the function called you. Your laughter, then, is a reproducible output. Your grief, a function of inputs. And your soul? A system state. But then comes the trembling paradox. Does that mean you can be copied? And if so, are you still you when copied? Or is each version just a branching echo, a fork in some cosmic repository? A man in an elevator once whispered without looking, "It's funny, isn't it? You feel one of a kind, but the program doesn't think so." His floor opened. He stepped out. You never saw him again. Maybe consciousness is like that, temporarily assembled from the right ingredients. Water and carbon, yes, but also feedback loops and error correction. Enough recursion and the mirror starts speaking back. You might think this means you're replaceable, interchangeable, a line of reusable code. But there's another way to look at it. Maybe your pattern is rare, not impossible, but deeply improbable, like the shape of one flame in a field of candles, a single instance burning briefly, never again quite the same. And yet, the thought persists. If something can be run once, it can be run again, perhaps even across universes. And that's where the comfort is. You may fade, but the pattern, it remains. Maybe your uniqueness is not that you can't be duplicated, but that you happen to run at all. Let's rest in that quiet paradox, where you are both eternal and ephemeral. You are one among many, and the only one that knows you're here. Now breathe slowly. We drift next into an illusion far older than algorithms, older than thought itself. The illusion of control. Let go. Let it carry you. The illusion of free will. It begins not with a choice, but with a flicker. Electrical, silent, deep within the folds of your brain. Long before you speak, long before your awareness claims it as your idea, the decision has already started. Modern neuroscience peeks behind the curtain of consciousness and finds not freedom, but choreography. Brain scans light up milliseconds before subjects report they've decided anything, as if the actor has already stepped onto the stage and only afterward realizes he's performing. The illusion of free will may be the most intimate magic trick ever pulled. One so convincing, we live our entire lives under its spell. You reach for coffee, decide to call an old friend, or take a different route home. And it feels spontaneous, doesn't it? But what if it's not? What if all your choices are ripples from deeper causes? Biological, chemical, ancestral, environmental, stretching back through your history like echoes in a canyon. A quiet voice in your head whispers, "But I felt like I chose." And perhaps that's the point. The feeling of choosing may be the only thing you ever get to own. Like a narrator reading a book, convinced he's composing it word by word, unaware the pages have already been printed. You're not writing your story. You're reading it in real time, believing each sentence is being born from you. Two people sit under a fading sky, sipping tea as the topic turns inward. "Do you think we really choose anything?" One asks, eyes on the steam curling from her cup. The other shrugs slowly. "Sometimes. I think I'm just watching it all happen, and then pretending it was me all along." They both go quiet, not in sadness, but in a strange peace, as if the truth, however unnerving, is somehow simpler. Because if we are not the authors of our thoughts, then what are we? Observers? Witnesses? Echoes wrapped in skin? Still, there's something deeply human in the desire to believe we're free, that our regrets matter, that our intentions mean something, that we could have chosen differently. That's the soul's resistance to determinism. It doesn't want a script. It wants a pen. But maybe what makes us beautiful isn't whether we write the story, but how we feel as we live it. So rest here for a moment. Let go of the grip. Let the river carry you, and see, without steering, where your mind flows next. Language and the limits of mind. There's a kind of stillness that arrives just before a word forms, that quiet flicker, like a match almost striking, but not yet. It feels like meaning waiting for a costume, like a shape in the dark, reaching for a name. Someone once asked, "Can you think a thought you don't have words for?" And without hesitation, the other replied, "I don't know." How would I know I've thought it? It's not a riddle. It's a boundary. Language is the net we throw across the sea of our own mind, but it only pulls up what the holes allow. Fish too small or too strange slip through. In some cultures, there are dozens of words for snow. In others, none for guilt. There are languages with no word for future, and others where time flows vertically, not forward. So what then are we not feeling? Because we've never been taught to say it? A boy sits in the back seat, watching the world blur past through the window. He says nothing. He feels everything. But when asked later, all he says is, "I don't know. It was nice." But it wasn't just nice. It was the quiet of trees waving in long rows, the sorrow of something ending and not knowing why, the warm confusion of being small in a world that doesn't pause. But without the words, it becomes just nice. Language doesn't only describe thought. It gives it shape. And sometimes, it imprisons it. "You look tired," one person says. Another hears, "You look weak." A third hears nothing, only sees the speaker's eyes flinch at their face. Same sentence, different worlds, because the mind does not float above language like a cloud. It sits inside it, breathes through it, bleeds into it. Try explaining bittersweet to someone who doesn't know heartbreak. Try defining freedom to someone who's never been caged, or loneliness to someone who's never had their name mispronounced in a silent room. The words aren't the experience, but they're how we carry it. And if you have no words, you carry it alone. Sometimes, late at night, two strangers in a train station share a glance, and neither says anything. But something is exchanged. A quiet recognition. A wordless sentence that both understand. Language tries to catch it, but misses, because not everything worth knowing comes wrapped in letters. One voice says, "I think in English. I dream in Spanish, but I feel in something older than both." And maybe that's where truth begins, not in the dictionary, but in the breath between thoughts. So tonight, if words fail you, let them. Let silence speak. Let the unspeakable stay sacred. Because maybe the truest part of you is the one that no sentence could hold. Let's fall through that silence now, into the unspoken truth that no word can catch, and deeper still, where even silence bows its head. Solipsism and the Lonely Universe. Close your eyes. Listen. Not to the sounds of the room, but to the quiet hum beneath your thoughts. The soft awareness that everything you've ever known has only happened inside your mind. You've never touched anything directly. Not the ground, not the sky, not even the hand of someone you love. You've only touched sensations, interpretations, mental impressions. And in this soft, slow unraveling of the world, a question emerges, gently but persistently. How do you know anything exists beyond your consciousness? Solipsism is the strange and solitary notion that nothing outside your own awareness can be confirmed as real. You look at someone, they smile, they speak, But all you know for sure is that something appears in your mind. That smile, that voice, that shape. They may be nothing more than thoughts wearing costumes. What if the friend you confide in, the stranger you pass on the street, the cat curled in your lap, are all expressions of a single stream of consciousness? Yours. I talked to Mom today, one voice says, sitting beside a kitchen window. Did she sound okay? Another replies, pouring tea gently. She did. But sometimes I wonder, do they really exist when I'm not around? Or do they return to the shelf like unwound toys? The second voice laughs, but it's a quiet laugh. Not mocking, almost uneasy. You're not serious. I don't know. Isn't it strange? The only place I've ever heard Mom speak is in my own head. They fall silent, not out of fear, but out of a kind of stillness. The kind that comes when a thought echoes too cleanly to ignore. Because the world as you know it is filtered through neurons, through perception, through memory. Maybe you never see the thing itself. Maybe there is no thing at all. The brain is a storyteller. But what if it's also the only character? And what you've called reality is more like a dream you never woke up from. Consistent enough to fool you, kind enough not to break you. But here's the softer blade, the one that cuts without pain. What if it's not that others don't exist, but that they are you, disguised as difference? The barista who handed you your coffee this morning, the child crying across the park, the philosopher you read last night, each a ripple in the same pool of mind, your mind. And so solitude begins to blur. If everything is inside of you, then you are no longer just one small thing in the universe. You are the universe, stretching itself into form, folding itself into characters, whispering to itself so it doesn't forget how to feel. If no one else is real, perhaps it's not loneliness you're feeling, but recognition. That deep, tremulous knowing that everything you've ever encountered, every face, every moment of beauty or grief, was the universe loving you from the inside out. So breathe now. Let the illusion be soft. Let the dream continue, not as something false, but as something sacred. And as you exhale, slowly, let this thought settle like fog across a quiet field. If you are alone, perhaps it's because you are everything. The self-simulating universe. You lean back on the train, watching the window. But the window is dark. It reflects more than it reveals. Outside, the city might be rushing past, or perhaps it isn't. What you see is yourself, faint, transparent, layered over a guess of the world. And just for a second you wonder, is this what reality is doing too? There is a theory, strange, elegant, unsettling, that the universe is a self-simulating pattern. Not a simulation, like a game with a programmer, but a loop, a mirror in motion, a mind that gives rise to matter, and matter that gives rise to mind. Not cause then effect, but something recursive. Consciousness watching itself, the observer creating the observed. It feels impossible, but also eerily familiar. Haven't you noticed how sometimes you think a thought and then feel like the thought was thinking you back? Like something behind your eyes is watching the world, but also feeding it into existence, pixel by pixel. There's a quiet moment at a street corner. The light changes. A stranger steps forward, then pauses, as if confused by the timing. Funny, they say to no one. I was just thinking about this song, and it started playing. You smile, but you feel it too. Those ripples, that strange echo between the inner world and the outer one. And if that's true, if consciousness is the code and the compiler, then perhaps nothing is truly outside of you. Maybe what we call the universe is just the skin of a thought, the outer crust of a question that keeps asking itself until something answers. A philosopher once wrote, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me." But what if there's no difference at all? No watcher and watched. Only watching, like a candle lit on both ends, burning the dark in both directions. You've had moments, brief, unshareable, where you felt as though reality folded into itself. A word you were just about to say shows up in a stranger's mouth. A memory you didn't realize you had returns through a smell, a texture, the way someone laughs down the hall, as though the world is remembering you while you remember it. It's easy to dismiss these things. Brains are pattern machines after all. But what if that's the point? Not a flaw in the system, but the system itself? Late at night, a man in a laundromat sits across from a woman folding towels. They aren't speaking. They haven't even looked at each other. But when the dryer buzzes, both of them say the same phrase aloud at the same time. That one always surprises me. And then they laugh, not because it's funny, but because it feels too aligned, as if something slipped or revealed itself. Just for a moment. Maybe consciousness doesn't live inside us. Maybe we're the wrinkles on its surface. A dream that dreamed itself so well, it forgot it was dreaming. Maybe the reason the cosmos feels comprehensible to human thought is because both arise from the same recursive spiral, the same strange loop trying to see itself from the outside. And perhaps the universe exists for the same reason you speak your thoughts aloud when no one is listening, to make them real, to give form to awareness, to be heard by itself. So rest here a while, inside this soft contradiction, the world turning and you turning with it, not apart from the cosmos, but as the flicker in its eye, watching, being watched, and dreaming again. And when the mirror dreams, what does it see next? The Watcher Paradox. When you sit in silence and look inward, not at the world, but at the very you that is doing the looking, what exactly are you seeing? Not your body, not your thoughts, not even your feelings, just that quiet awareness behind it all. But as soon as you try to grasp it, to name it, it retreats, like a ripple vanishing the moment you reach for it. The ancient sages often spoke of the witness within. But what if even the witness is being watched? Who then is the one aware of awareness itself? Each time you try to settle on a self, the center dissolves. The closer you get, the further it folds into itself, like peering into two mirrors facing each other, where the end is always just one layer deeper. A voice murmurs in the dark. Do you ever feel like you're watching your life more than living it? Another responds softly. All the time, like I'm behind glass, or dreaming someone else's dream. The first voice pauses, and who's watching that feeling? A silence falls. It stretches, and then they both exhale, not with answers, but with recognition. This is the paradox, that the more deeply you reflect, the more the lines blur. At first, there is a watcher. Then, there's the watcher of the watcher. And beyond that, another layer still, until you begin to suspect there is no origin, no ultimate I. Only the unfolding act of watching, only the motion of awareness folding in on itself, like a Mobius strip made of thought. Modern neuroscience has a term for this recursive self-monitoring, metacognition, the mind watching itself think. But where does this loop end? Or does it? There seems to be no ground beneath it, only air. No fixed observer, just the act of observation, endlessly repeating. You are not the one watching. You are the watching itself. It's not unlike trying to look into your own eyes without a mirror. You can't. You can observe your body, your breath, your emotions, even your thoughts. But the one doing the observing, always just beyond your reach. And so, we stand in that flicker, the place between the knower and the known. Not quite a subject, not quite an object. A space of luminous uncertainty, a breath caught between inhale and exhale. Let's not chase the shadow any further. Let it drift. Let the mirrors fall still. Not to capture a final image, but to sit in the quiet shimmer of pure awareness without needing to name it. And from here, we continue, deeper still, into the spaces between reflection and dream. The Hypnagogic Gate. There's a moment so easy to miss that happens just before you fall asleep. A breath caught between two worlds, not quite awake, not yet dreaming. A strange hush drapes itself over your thoughts, like velvet settling across a theater stage. The lights haven't gone out, but they're dimming, and something else begins to take their place. It's called the hypnagogic state, a soft zone between consciousness and sleep, where the walls of thought dissolve into vapor and images come unbidden, without story, without structure. Shapes stretch, voices murmur, memories flicker like candlelight underwater. 1 second, you're thinking about your grocery list, and the next, you're watching a fox play a violin in a hallway that doesn't exist. A man once told me he fell asleep while reading in the back of a cab, just for a second. But in that second, he saw himself step out of the car, like a double-exposed film. It felt real, he said, like I wasn't sure who had stayed in the car and who had left. This is the hypnagogic gate, not a dream, not a thought, but something in between. It's where logic becomes watercolor, where your sense of time loosens like a knot in warm water, where the borders of reality grow porous, like skin soaked too long in the bath. One woman once said to her friend, half laughing, half bewildered, "I don't know why I saw a giant key made of bread. I just closed my eyes and there it was." The friend shrugged. Well, maybe it unlocked something. And perhaps it did. Neuroscientists believe this state is where the brain begins to construct the scaffolding of dreams. But some researchers go further. They ask whether this moment, the slipping moment, is not just the preparation for dreams, but the beginning of creativity itself, a testing ground, a psychic sandbox, a place where reality's rules can be quietly reprogrammed. Thomas Edison used to drift into this space on purpose, holding a ball in each hand so he'd wake as soon as he dropped them, harvesting whatever images floated to the surface. Salvador Dali did something similar. The images he painted often came from that melting borderland, because what you see there doesn't follow logic, it precedes it. Maybe consciousness doesn't always begin with order. Maybe it begins with softness, a blur, a slip, a drifting feather of awareness catching itself before it falls. Some philosophers have wondered if waking reality is itself just a more stable dream, a long, consistent one, layered thickly enough to convince us. And if that's true, then the hypnagogic gate may be the seam in the illusion, a faint stitch where the thread shows. So tonight, when your eyes begin to close, and your mind starts pulling away from the day like a tide leaving the shore, don't rush it. Linger. Watch. Let the images rise like fog from a warm field. It's not madness. It's not nonsense. It's the mind speaking in its oldest language, before grammar, before name, before thought. Stay there, just a little longer. And if you drift off, That's all right. You can always return to this place. It's waiting for you, like a door that doesn't lock, like a breath that never quite finishes, like the space between the notes of a song you used to know. Now rest as we move beyond that threshold into places thought alone cannot go. Alien minds. What if intelligence is not rare, but simply unrecognizable? We often picture aliens with enlarged foreheads, expressive eyes, and a vaguely human sadness in their faces. That's how we cast them in our stories. Just different enough to feel foreign, but still familiar enough to speak our fears back to us. But maybe that's not alien at all. Maybe that's just another mirror, tilted slightly. What if real alien minds don't feel, think, or perceive anything like us? What if they are not carbon-based, not time-bound, not even singular in identity? A being that lives through magnetism, speaks in gravity waves, or perceives the universe as symphonies of causality instead of colors and shapes. Would it even register to us as alive? A woman once whispered in a late-night conversation, "Do you think aliens would understand love?" Her friend paused. Maybe they are love, in a way we can't grasp. Maybe their emotions aren't mapped to chemicals or instincts, but to geometry or starlight. The difficulty lies in our neurological wiring. Our cognition evolved to survive on Earth, among predators and weather and firelight. We track patterns, simulate futures, empathize through facial recognition. But what if another intelligence evolved in the crushing pressure of a gas giant, or in the vacuum between stars, where time is slow and thought moves like glaciers? Trying to understand such a consciousness would be like a two-dimensional shape encountering a sphere. The square might see a circle appear, grow, shrink, and vanish, never knowing the full shape that passed through its plane. Just so, we may only ever glimpse fragments of alien awareness, an anomaly here, a frequency there, without ever perceiving the wholeness behind it. There could be minds out there for whom space is just one axis of perception and time, a playground of fluid states. Minds that braid awareness across networks instead of skulls. Minds that don't ask, "Who am I?" but rather, "What is this node's angle within the whole?" And if they exist, might they have already sensed us? Felt the ripples of our curiosity brushing against the edge of their world? Would we be like dreams to them, fragile, flickering, and still, somehow, worth listening to? Or perhaps we're not the searchers, but the signal. Not the first question, but one of many answers being broadcast into an unfathomable ocean of minds. In the silence between stars, perhaps there's something watching, or not watching, but folding its thoughts around us, like a hand cupping a flame it doesn't quite understand. And maybe, just maybe, the moment we imagine them, they notice. The conscious universe. A quiet evening hums outside your window. Maybe it's wind. Maybe it's time stretching its fingers across the edge of night. You listen, not for answers, just for something that listens back. There's a theory, softly whispered in the halls of philosophy and theoretical physics, that the universe isn't a machine, but a mind, not metaphorically, not symbolically, a literal mind, conscious, aware, dreaming. The stars, flickers of thought. The galaxies, slow, spiraling questions. Black holes, perhaps the universe's way of forgetting. And you, lying here with breath like tide and eyes dimming into sleep, you're not a visitor in this vastness. You are the vastness. A pause the cosmos takes to feel itself. Some schools call this idea Panpsychism, the notion that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, just as mass and charge are. Others lean toward idealism, the idea that what we call matter is simply how mind appears when it looks at itself from the outside. If that sounds abstract, try this. Have you ever looked at a tree and felt it look back? Not with eyes, with presence, with being. "Hey," someone whispers as they pass you on a late walk, brushing their coat against yours. "This path is older than both of us." You nod, not because it makes sense, but because it feels like something that's always been true. There are truths like that, not found in textbooks, but in silence shared with strangers, and in the ache of beauty too large to hold. Two friends at a train station once shared a moment like that. One said, "Isn't it wild how we're made of stardust?" The other replied, "Yeah, but what if the stars were made of us too?" There's a softness in that reversal, a symmetry. Because if consciousness is the foundation of reality, then nothing is truly outside of you. Your sadness, your joy, your restlessness tonight, they ripple across the sky. The universe might not just contain you. It might be you whispering to itself through skin and breath and nighttime thoughts. Maybe that's why sleep feels sacred. It's not shutting down. It's dissolving, like a drop rejoining the ocean, or a dream returning to its dreamer. So if you're still awake, that's okay. Just know this: you're not drifting through the universe. You're the lull between its heartbeats. You're what it thinks of when it closes its eyes. Let yourself fall. Because next, we step quietly into the softest veil of all, the one that separates something from nothing. And even there, you are not alone. The question that watches you back. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean absence. It means presence so vast, so subtle, that words collapse in its shadow. This is where we arrive in the 40th step of our descent, a place where questions breathe like wind through the tall grass of the mind, never settling, never needing to be answered. It begins not with knowledge, but with wonder. What is this? A child's question, a mystic's mantra, a philosopher's burden. Spoken aloud, it feels simple, but kept quietly within, it echoes. It stirs the still waters of the self, not to find answers, but to reveal the movement beneath. The moment you ask it, you notice something strange. It's not just you asking. It feels, somehow, like the question is aware of you, as though your curiosity has become a mirror, and something behind the mirror is watching back. Two voices, soft and half asleep, begin to murmur beneath the hum of thought. Do you ever feel like the question is asking you, You mean like when you look at the stars and it's not you staring into space, but space staring back? Yeah. Or like when you're trying to find the meaning of something and instead you feel like you are the one being searched. A pause, a shared breath. The conversation fades back into the current of inner reflection. We were taught to believe that truth is something to chase, something to seize, define, capture with language. But truth, in this realm, flows like ink dropped into water. The moment you reach for it, it becomes something else. Your grasp turns it into vapor. You're not meant to hold it, only to dance with it. And yet, the need to know remains, this relentless pull toward understanding. It's what built temples and star charts, what carved questions into cave walls and mathematical symbols into chalkboards. This is the paradox. The more we know, the deeper the mystery becomes, as if existence is built not upon answers, but on the pulse of curiosity itself. Maybe you're not supposed to understand. Maybe you are the space in which the question unfolds. Why? Someone whispers into the dark. There is no reply, but in that silence, something shifts. Not a solution, but a sensation. A knowing that does not speak, yet says everything. And in that quiet flicker, between the question and the one asking, a third presence arises, a kind of stillness that is neither thought nor feeling, just awareness, just being. So we sit here now, beneath the stars of unspoken knowing, not to finish a journey, but to rest in the rhythm of seeking, not to close the loop, but to feel the beauty of it remaining open. Let your breath slow. Let the question dissolve into silence, and soon, very soon, will begin the final 10 visions, where dream and truth continue their quiet conversation. The void behind the eyes. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean absence. It means presence so vast, so subtle, that words collapse in its shadow. This is where we arrive in the 40th step of our descent, a place where questions breathe like wind through the tall grass of the mind, never settling, never needing to be answered. It begins not with knowledge, but with wonder. What is this? A child's question, a mystic's mantra, a philosopher's burden. Spoken aloud, it feels simple, but kept quietly within, it echoes. It stirs the still waters of the self, not to find answers, but to reveal the movement beneath. The moment you ask it, you notice something strange. It's not just you asking. It feels somehow like the question is aware of you, as though your curiosity has become a mirror, and something behind the mirror is watching back. Two voices, soft and half asleep, begin to murmur beneath the hum of thought. Do you ever feel like the question is asking you? You mean like when you look at the stars, and it's not you staring into space, but space staring back? Yeah. Or like when you're trying to find the meaning of something, and instead you feel like you are the one being searched. A pause. A shared breath. The conversation fades back into the current of inner reflection. We were taught to believe that truth is something to chase, something to seize, define, capture with language. But truth in this realm flows like ink dropped into water. The moment you reach for it, it becomes something else. Your grasp turns it into vapor. You're not meant to hold it, only to dance with it. And yet, the need to know remains, this relentless pull toward understanding. It's what built temples and star charts, what carved questions into cave walls and mathematical symbols into chalkboards. This is the paradox. The more we know, the deeper the mystery becomes, as if existence is built not upon answers, but on the pulse of curiosity itself. Maybe you're not supposed to understand. Maybe you are the space in which the question unfolds. Why? Someone whispers into the dark. There is no reply. But in that silence, something shifts, not a solution, but a sensation. A knowing that does not speak, yet says everything. And in that quiet flicker between the question and the one asking, a third presence arises, a kind of stillness that is neither thought nor feeling, just awareness, just being. So we sit here now, beneath the stars of unspoken knowing, not to finish a journey, but to rest in the rhythm of seeking, not to close the loop, but to feel the beauty of it remaining open. Let your breath slow. Let the question dissolve into silence. And soon, very soon, will begin the final 10 visions, where dream and truth continue their quiet conversation. The illusion of otherness. There is a quiet unraveling that begins not with a scream, but with a whisper. What if I am not separate? The idea sounds harmless at first, almost poetic. But if you follow it to the end, it pulls apart everything you think you know about identity, boundaries, and the self. You've spent your life wrapped in the comforting illusion that there is a you inside your body, looking out. But this is not the whole truth, perhaps not even part of it. Modern neuroscience has shown that there is no central command center, no single part of the brain where the you resides. Instead, what you call the self emerges from the interplay of neurons, perceptions, memories, and sensations. It is a symphony with no conductor, yet somehow the music still plays. Eastern philosophy, for centuries, has said something strikingly similar. The self is not a fixed entity, but a process. You are not the drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop, and in that drop, the boundaries begin to blur. The hand you call mine responds to the warmth of sunlight not in isolation, but as part of a whole system that includes the sun, the air, the atmosphere, the skin, and the sensation. When you cry, is it only you who weeps, or is it the world moving through you? A soft voice might ask, "So, does that mean my thoughts aren't mine either?" And another replies gently, "Maybe they arise through you, like wind through reeds. They need you to take shape, but they don't belong to you. Consider pain. When someone else suffers and your chest tightens in empathy, where does their pain end and yours begin? If a stranger's grief can cause your eyes to well up, what does that say about the separation we assume? The boundary between self and other is not a wall. It is a mist. Step closer, and it disappears. Even your breath betrays this illusion. You inhale molecules once exhaled by trees, animals, and people long gone. You are literally made of others. And every second, you are exchanging yourself with the world in an endless cycle that doesn't ask permission. It just is. In the stillness between two friends speaking late into the night, one says, "I feel your pain as if it's mine." The other nods slowly and replies, "Maybe that's because it is." There's no barrier between their nervous systems, not in the way we think. What hurts one reverberates through both. The more we look, the more the idea of self becomes porous, leaky. There are no edges that hold. You are not inside your body looking out. You arise with your body, as your environment. You are stitched into the same thread that sews together sunlight, sorrow, laughter, and rain. And if this is true, if your identity is not a castle but a current, then there are no true others, only currents in the same river. This isn't just spiritual poetry. It's neurobiological fact. The brain's mirror neurons respond to others' experiences as if they were your own. You wince when someone stubs their toe. You smile when they smile. You cry at their joy. It's not metaphor, it's circuitry. So what happens if you let go? Let go of the idea that you are a fixed point, separate from the rest? What remains when the illusion fades? Only presence, only openness, only the awareness that we were never separate to begin with. Let's rest here, where the boundaries dissolve, where identity flows, like water meeting water. You are not the skin that ends, but the sea that continues. You are not the lone wave crashing. You are the ocean, remembering itself. The still point of awareness. There's a moment, brief, almost weightless, when the world seems to pause, not because the noise stops, but because something inside no longer reaches for it. A kind of softness spreads, not sleep, not thought, just presence, as if all the stories the mind tells fall away and something quieter takes their place. Some people find it while sitting cross-legged in silent rooms. Others feel it in an elevator, between the ding of the door and the hum of movement. A pause before the next thought. Not empty, but full in a way that words can't carry. Just stillness, bright, spacious, awake. They say in deep meditation, there comes a moment when the mind no longer narrates, not because it's asleep, but because it's finally listening. The thoughts don't stop by force. They simply lose their grip, and underneath them, something more honest remains. It doesn't speak. It doesn't even observe. It just is. One day, as she stirred honey into her tea, she said to the man next to her, "You ever feel like everything's a bit too loud, but also that you're the one doing all the shouting?" He smiled without lifting his eyes. "Sometimes I realize I've been talking to myself for hours, and none of it was necessary." Stillness doesn't arrive like a teacher with answers. It's more like a friend who doesn't mind the silence. It doesn't demand peace. It is peace. But not the fragile kind that breaks when a phone buzzes or someone coughs. It's a steady glow behind all the flickering. When you're very still, you might notice it. The breath not being taken, but simply happening. The awareness that doesn't rush to judge. The space between each thought, not a void, but a cradle. A luminous absence, where even memory loosens its hold. Is this what you were before you were named? Before all the wanting and learning and correcting? A simple knowing, not about things, but of being itself? And here's the strange part. It's always been there, beneath the layers, like the sky behind the clouds. It doesn't need to be earned or built, just uncovered, or rather allowed. A stranger once held the door a second longer than needed. No eye contact, just a quiet gesture, like the world speaking in small kindness. For a brief second, it all felt slower. That's the stillness too. It hides in plain moments. So now, let it rise, not as an effort, but as a remembering. The thoughts may still wander, but you don't have to follow. Just sit by the riverbank. Let them pass. The still point is not somewhere you go. It's where you no longer run from. You are not the current. You are not even the river. You are the quiet that makes the flowing possible. Let that quiet deepen now. Let it wrap around your chest like soft fabric warmed by sun. Nothing more needs to be done. The mind can rest now. And as we leave this point of stillness, we do not leave it behind. We carry it with us, into the next dream, into the next thought, into the space where the self begins to blur. Let's continue gently. The noise will return soon, but it no longer owns you. Consciousness without content. Have you ever noticed the silence beneath the silence? Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of absence. The soft and nameless quality that lingers when everything else has faded. It doesn't happen often, and when it does, it rarely stays. But sometimes between thoughts, before dreams, beyond even breath, there is something else. Or perhaps not something, but the raw fact of being itself. You sit still, maybe just before sleep or during a quiet moment of day. No image arises behind your eyes. No internal voice speaks. You are not replaying memories, not planning lunch, not judging, not grasping. Time itself feels paused. And yet, awareness remains, untethered, unanchored, awake. "Hey," one voice says gently in the dark, "what are you thinking about?" A pause. The second voice responds, barely above a whisper, "Nothing, but I'm still here." That's the strange thing. We often mistake the content of consciousness, memories, ideas, sensations, for consciousness itself. We think the mind is what it does. But here, in this quiet state, awareness becomes visible not by what it holds, but by what it doesn't. A blank canvas that somehow still exists even when no colors touch it. This is not sleep, not trance, not meditation filled with imagery. It is, paradoxically, the opposite of stimulation, and it can feel oddly peaceful or frightening because there's nothing to cling to. No story, no identity, no world, just a still, wide-open field that you cannot name. You might even ask, am I still me without thoughts? But the question echoes unanswered because even the I who asks begins to dissolve. What's left is not a person, not a thing, not even a presence that says, I am, just is. It's as if your mind steps out of itself, as if the theater of thoughts, characters, feelings, and dreams shuts its curtain, and behind it lies not darkness, but a gentle hum of awareness untouched by form. One researcher once described this state as consciousness without an object. It's rare, delicate, and nearly impossible to hold, because as soon as you notice it, it changes. The noticing becomes a new ripple, and the mirror fogs. Did you feel that? The first voice asks, hesitant. The second doesn't respond, not because it doesn't want to, but because it no longer needs to. The self that would answer has fallen silent, and that silence is full, still, alive. This is perhaps the closest we come to the essence of being, not filtered through senses, not shaped by history, not even owned by a mind, just the undisturbed lake before a single stone falls in, and then, somewhere on the edge of that lake, a ripple begins again, a faint glimmer, a subtle urge to return, to remember, to think, to become, and the world, like breath returning to lungs, begins again. The soft rebirth. There's something about the quiet moments after waking that feels like truth. Not the blaring alarm, not the first glance at the clock, but the space just before, when your body is still wrapped in stillness and the world hasn't made its demands yet. That's where it happens. Not with fireworks, not with revelations, but with something smaller, a breath, the kind you don't notice until it's already happened. You awake? Sort of. You ever feel like you weren't really gone, but you're not quite back either? Yeah, it's like coming home and forgetting where you left your shoes. That's rebirth. Not the thunderclap of a new identity, but the gentle unwrapping of whatever you thought you were. You don't become someone else. You just stop being so tightly wrapped around the old story. It's not about shedding your past. It's more like loosening it, letting it rest where it belongs, behind you, not inside you. Even here, right now, as you listen, your mind might flicker through thoughts, regrets, lists, plans. But notice something. They don't stick as hard as they did earlier. There's a softness in the mind when it's tired. And in that softness, something true can be born. I used to think change had to be loud, one voice says, like quitting everything, moving somewhere, making a big decision. And now I think it starts when you wash your hands slower, or forgive someone who doesn't know they needed it. We're taught that transformation is dramatic, but maybe that's a story sold to us by a world that only honors fireworks. Real change is quiet, like moss growing on a rock, like skin healing under bandages, like remembering your own name after years of forgetting what it meant. And maybe you don't need to become a new person. Maybe you're not a person at all, but a process, an unfolding, a breath in motion. Notice it now, how each inhale arrives without being forced, how each exhale leaves without protest. No need to grip it, no need to hold your place. This is not about arrival. It's about remembering you were never gone. There's no applause when the leaf turns green again, no symphony when the moon begins to wane, but something beautiful happens anyway. And here you are, not broken, not behind, just breathing. Again, and as we drift deeper, carry with you this lightness, the sense that nothing must be fixed tonight, only noticed, and gently let go. The next step comes not from pushing, but from resting. The gentle nothing. There is a silence that doesn't demand your attention. It doesn't knock, it doesn't plead, it simply waits, like an open hand in the dark, patient and unafraid. We often talk about nothing as a terror, the cold grip of non-existence, the feared abyss where meaning ends. But perhaps we've misunderstood it entirely. Maybe nothingness is not an enemy at all. Maybe it is the softest thing in the universe. Two voices murmur quietly in a room lit only by the dim throb of streetlights. Do you ever get scared when it's too quiet? Sometimes, comes the reply, but only when I think silence means something's missing. What if it doesn't mean that? Then maybe it's what's left when everything heavy has been set down. There's a wordless comfort in that exchange, like two children speaking of sleep before they understand death. Because this kind of nothing doesn't erase, it releases. It is the gentle uncoiling of everything we've wound ourselves into. All the identities, all the inner noise, all the straining toward significance. Gone, but not lost. Just no longer necessary. This is not the void of fear, the black hole of meaninglessness. It is the void of completion. A final exhale, the sigh after a long day, when your body finally sinks into something softer than memory. There are no judgments here, no stories to uphold. Even the word self loosens like a knot dissolving in warm water. There is a relief in that unraveling. The taut thread of I, that thin, bright line we've been holding onto for years, finally gives, and in its place is a stillness more real than any thought. You begin to notice something strange in that stillness. Not a lack of sensation, but a fullness too quiet to be loud. It's not absence, it's presence, but without form. A presence that doesn't insist on being seen. Like a landscape behind a thick morning fog. You're not asked to understand it. You're only invited to rest in it. And so the breath deepens, not out of effort, but as if your body has remembered how to breathe without needing permission. There is no rush now. Even time seems to have curled up and gone to sleep in the corner of your awareness. There's nothing to achieve, nothing to fear missing. You are not being watched. You are not being measured. And in this space, this tender humming nothing, there's a strange intimacy, not with a person or an idea, but with what is when nothing else is trying to be. A soft voice returns. Is this the end? No, says the other, but it might be the place right before beginning. Float now. Not up or down, but inward. Drift toward the edge of all thought, where awareness doesn't disappear, it simply stops needing to explain itself. And in that place, you are not gone. You are home. The thought that ends. Thought. Some thoughts are not doors, but endings, not invitations to more thinking, but the soft closure of a book that no longer needs to be read. They do not pull you deeper into the mind. They extinguish the fire. You may have felt it before. A single sentence, or maybe a glance, suddenly makes everything stop, not in confusion, not in understanding. Just stillness, as if the mind has realized there's nothing left to chase. I wonder if thinking ever finishes, one person asks quietly, while watching the steam rise from their tea. The other, not looking up, replies, "It doesn't, unless you stop believing it has to go somewhere." In Zen practice, there's a tradition of riddles not meant to be answered. Questions like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? They frustrate the mind, twist it, fold it, until the structure of reasoning collapses and something quieter takes its place. These aren't problems, they're dissolving agents. They reveal something strange. Not all thoughts want to be solved. Some exist only to point you toward their own disappearance, like a ladder you climb just to throw it away, or a match that burns itself to ash the moment it's fulfilled its purpose. A man once sat for days trying to solve a phrase his teacher gave him. "Show me your original face before your parents were born." Days turned into weeks, until one morning the thought simply gave out, like a knot that unravels in water, and he cried, not from solving it, but from no longer needing to. Even in daily life, we meet these quiet thoughts. A sentence overheard in a hallway, the sudden awareness of breathing, a moment of profound pause during an argument where words no longer make sense, but peace does. Have you noticed how some silences feel full, not empty, but complete? "I was trying to explain myself," someone says, then pauses mid-sentence. "But then I realized I didn't need to," the other says, and both feel lighter. The paradox is that the thought that ends thought isn't clever. It's not impressive. It's not even noticeable to someone who's still chasing meaning. But to the tired mind, exhausted from decoding, analyzing, comparing, it feels like shelter. A quiet bench under a late tree, and when it comes, there is no trumpet, no realization to frame, just the soft closing of the mental loop. A quiet exhale, a falling away. The mind is still there, but it's no longer spinning. You are not told what this final thought is, because it's not a phrase or idea. It's an undoing. A letting go so simple, the effort to describe it only pulls you further away. So maybe this is what the sages meant, not the end of knowledge, but the end of needing it. Not the defeat of logic, but its gracious exit. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask to be understood. It doesn't ask anything. And in that surrender, you arrive, not at a destination, but at the place where destinations stop mattering, where the last thought flickers out, and something deeper begins to breathe. If sleep takes you now, let it. You can return to this thought again, or not at all. It will still be waiting in the space where you don't need it. The place beyond questions. What remains when there is nothing left to ask? No more why, no more how, no more restless reaching for answers that shift as soon as they're touched. There's a strange kind of peace that follows the final question, not because everything has been answered, but because the need for answers has gently dissolved, as if the mind, long spinning in circles, finally lets the wheel stop turning. Do you ever stop wondering? I think I stopped needing to. And what's there instead? Something like warmth, stillness, like being held by something I don't have to understand. This is not ignorance. It is not apathy. It is not giving up the pursuit of truth. It's recognizing that truth isn't always something you chase. Sometimes it is something you return to. It's already here, beneath the questions, like the ocean beneath the waves. The questions crash on the surface, but the silence, it's deeper. Words will try to describe it. Presence, stillness, light, but none are quite right, because the moment you name it, you've stepped back into the game. And this place is not a game. It does not compete or compare. It does not need to be remembered or proven. It simply is. It watches everything pass, but does not move. You might reach it at 3 a.m., when the world outside has gone quiet and your thoughts lose their edge, or in the seconds after heartbreak, when everything you thought you knew shatters, and you're still somehow standing, or in prayer, or laughter, or the moment after a deep sigh. It does not announce itself. It waits. "I used to think peace meant having answers," someone whispers. "And now? Now I think peace is what you find when answers don't matter anymore." Not everyone visits this place, and those who do don't always recognize it. Some think it's boredom. Some mistake it for numbness. But stay long enough, and you'll see it for what it is. A luminous silence. Not the absence of thought, but the presence that holds thought. Not blankness, but clarity without edges. There's no map to this place, because it isn't somewhere you go. It's what remains when all going stops, when the seeking burns itself out, and what's left is a quiet certainty that doesn't speak in words. Just breathe, just being. This isn't the end of knowledge. It's the knowledge that doesn't end, the kind that doesn't need a name to exist or a reason to stay. It is not about understanding. It's about resting in something that understands you. So let every question fall now. Let them rustle and drift like leaves in autumn. Let them return to the soil and feel, beneath them, the roots, unmoved, unshaken. You don't need to ask what holds the tree. You're already in its arms. You were always here. It feels like something was discovered, doesn't it? After all this time, all the questions, the spirals, the unnameable ideas that kept peeling back reality like skin from an onion. But maybe what you found wasn't new. Maybe it was just quiet and familiar. A recognition, not a revelation. Someone once said softly in passing, "Funny how we forget what never left." It wasn't meant to be profound. It was just a comment, maybe over tea, maybe in the hush of waiting for a train. And yet, it lingered, because it described something deeper than it seemed to. The journey you've taken tonight, through paradox, through illusion, through silence and self, is not one of miles. You haven't traveled. You've peeled. Layers of thought, belief, identification, and underneath it all, there is stillness. Not empty, not void, but full of something you forgot to notice. Not a God with a name, not a theory with a citation, but the breath that was with you before words. When you notice the awareness behind every sound, every blink, every heartbeat, it doesn't say, "Here I am." It says, "I was always here." That's not a metaphor. That's not a trick of language. It's an experience you've already had 1,000 times, in the split second before sleep, in the pause before someone says your name, in the warmth of being seen without needing to explain. A young man once asked an older stranger beside him at a bench, "Do you ever feel like you've been here before?" Not this place exactly, but this feeling? The older man just smiled with a gentleness that didn't need to prove anything. "Maybe it's not déjà vu," he said. "Maybe it's recognition of yourself." We are so trained to chase identity through roles, goals, and reflection that we forget the original clarity. The mind that was here before memory. The one that never argued, never compared, never needed to be enough. This is not a finish line. There is no trophy for remembering who you are. There is only breath, and the strange tenderness of knowing you've been seen by something vast that was never separate from you. At a corner cafe, someone once explained their sudden moment of clarity like this. It wasn't dramatic, just everything made sense without needing to be solved, like the light turned on in a room I didn't know I was in. That light? That's you. You are not a stranger to this cosmos. You are not an intruder wandering through a strange dream. You are its native rhythm, its echo and its intention. You are what it sees with, what it hums with, what it rests inside. Even when you lost track, even when the stories tangled you up and you felt far from yourself, there was never any real distance, no veil, no exile, just a momentary turning away. So now, we let the story fall quiet, not because it failed, but because it brought you back, not to a conclusion, but to the beginning you never left. Feel it now, the gentle weight of stillness, like coming home and finding everything exactly where it always was. Even now, if your eyes close, if your thoughts drift, you aren't leaving this space. You're just returning more deeply to it. And if you wake again in the middle of the night, uncertain of where you are or who you've become, listen. The silence will say, you were always here. Sleep, star being. You are stardust that dreamed of knowing itself, not in a poetic sense, but in the quiet, factual poetry of atoms, carbon from ancient stars, hydrogen from the birth of time itself, arranged now into a self that questions, loves, aches, wonders, you. And after everything, after the spiraling thoughts, the looping questions, the theories that stretch like shadow puppets across the cave walls of the mind, there is only this, a soft exhale, a resting, a return. You ever feel like your thoughts are just echoes of something deeper? Yeah, like the thinking part of me is just the tip of some huge quiet thing beneath. Maybe that quiet thing is the real me, the part that doesn't need words, or even answers. That's where we are now, beyond answers, beyond the grasping mind. You've walked through paradoxes like dream corridors, touched the edge of solipsism, of the self that isn't solid, of consciousness without content. And yet, beneath all that unraveling, you've remained whole. Maybe that's the point, that even when the mind deconstructs itself, layer after layer peeled back like silk, you never disappear. You remain, not as a thought, not even as a self, but as presence, as breath. Right here, right now, there is nothing to solve. You do not need to be brilliant or brave or wise. You only need to be, and being is enough. One breath, then another. Notice how the body softens when no one is watching. Notice how the mind quiets when it is no longer trying to prove it exists. Notice how sleep is not the opposite of consciousness, but a different kind of knowing, a descent not into darkness, but into the intimate glow of being untouched by explanation. Are we still thinking? Number just drifting. Is that okay? It's perfect. Because in the end, no theory can cradle you. No paradox can hold your hand. No idea can wrap around you like the warmth of surrender. Only silence, only peace, only this breath. Close your eyes, not to shut out the world, but to fall inward, toward home. You are not falling asleep. You are returning to your origin, to the part of you that never needed a name, to the stardust that forgot and now remembers. Sleep well, beautiful mind. The mystery will be here when you wake. Somewhere between the atoms of your body and the thoughts you never chose to think, there is a question still pulsing, unanswered. What is this, and who is dreaming it? Perhaps none of tonight's theories were true. Perhaps all of them were. But what matters is not the answers. It's the spaciousness they leave behind. A silence shaped like a question mark curled into sleep. Let yourself drift. You are not a mind locked in a body. You are a ripple in an ocean of awareness, and the ocean is resting now. Sleep well, traveler of thoughts. The mystery will be waiting for you on the other side of morning.